everybody, from Common Room Radio. I'm Sarah Kate Pizan, and I got a bottle of schnapps and half a rhubarb pie. Let's see which one makes us sick first.
I'm Alistair Stevens, and from what Mr. Stark has told me, Captain Rogers relied heavily on you for courage, strategy, and moral guidance. You were his support. Your desire to help others is noble, but I doubt you'll find much success unless you allow others to help you.
And I'm Elizabeth Stevens, and I know my value. Anyone else's opinion doesn't really matter.
And we're doing Agent Carter this week.
It's Agent Carter, a Vintonless episode of Excelsior.
A Vintonless episode.
Because he's out wandering the earth,
That
helping
is
orphans.
really sad.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, it's totally fine. Everything's good. It's going to be okay. He's coming back.
I just imagined a Vintonless world, and my heart got really, really sad.
No, I don't want that. None of us want that.
He's currently improving the scenery in California, which is saying something.
Yeah. He's a hell of a guy.
So this week, we're discussing the first season of Marvel's Agent Carter, a mid-season replacement on ABC for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Agent Carter lasted 2 seasons. Inexplicably, people didn't watch the show. I don't know what to do with that.
God, that pisses me off.
Yeah.
How though? Okay, to be fair, season 2 had some problems.
Season 2 not that great.
Season 1 is spectacular.
It's
I
so
think
good.
that they don't have a miss.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, no. This is one of my favorite seasons of television ever. I really do feel like just the construction, the story, the characters, the arcs, all of it. I feel like, I mean, just like what you said, Elizabeth, it doesn't miss at all. Like, it's just, batting 1,000 with this season of TV.
Which, to be fair, if you only have 8 episodes,
it's real easy to do.
well, I wouldn't say it's easy, but you'd better hit it. It better be a home run.
Yeah,
if you have
exactly.
8 episodes, you better really do your work.
So Agent Carter, of course, appeared originally in Captain America, the First Avenger. Peggy Carter showed up there as the love interest for Steve Rogers, the love that shall endure, the greatest love story in modern cinema history.
Yes.
We're all, I think, super into Peggy and Steve.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And Peggy independently, too.
Yes.
It is one of the greatest accomplishments in the first season of Agent Carter that they introduce a love interest who is almost good enough for her. He's almost there.
I do love. I am a Daniel Souza apologist, and I love him so much. Like, oh God, my heart. Okay, all right, no, it's fine. It's fine.
We've got time. We'll get to all of that. Before we get to the first season of Agent Carter, though, we have to talk about her small screen origins. We have to talk about the 2013 Marvel one-shot, which was released on the DVD set for Iron Man 3. This is an 11-minute encapsulation of Peggy's adventures with the SSR.
Which neither Elizabeth nor I had ever seen before.
I just gave you both a gift. Just a gift right there.
It
Hey,
really
have you seen this little 10-minute, Agent Carter movie? If you haven't, then you should probably sit down and watch this thing because it's pretty fantastic.
It's amazing.
It's very good.
It was directed by Louis D'Esposito. It was written by Eric Pearson. Of course, it develops the characters from First Avenger. It was released right before Winter Soldier, so we hadn't seen any more of Steve since the First Avenger. We get this introduction, and then it's Peggy's adventures with the SSR, inexplicably helmed by Bradley Whitford. This is, we should say, non-canonical.
Yes.
I was going to say, which actually made me just a little sad because I do want the Peggy running S.H.I.E.L.D. with Howard Stark show. Like, I want that show.
It would be very good.
But I loved Agent Carter, so I don't want it to say, oh, now I'm disappointed in what Agent Carter was. But I'm really glad that I saw Agent Carter first.
Yes.
Because if it then came in and it was just her, like, schlepping her way through the SSR, I would be really disappointed when it could have been her badassing her way through S.H.I.E.L.D.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, we were talking about how the fight choreography in this one shot is just so spectacular. God, it's so good. Like, please just give me hours and hours and hours of Haley Atwell beating the shit out of dudes with briefcases.
As discussed on previous episodes of Excelsior, primary value there for Sarah.
Yeah, well, and also it turns out my fetish. So,
So Captain America, the First Avenger was released in 2011. The one-shot was released in 2013. Then in 2015, we got the ABC series. 8 episodes in the first season, created, written, helmed by Marcus and McFeely.
Yeah.
Of whom we are enormous fans here on Excelsior. I think they are our favorite writers currently working with Marvel. They have defined the shape and the tone of the MCU. They're going to be responsible for Infinity War, which makes me very happy, and I'm looking forward to that. What was your introduction, Elizabeth, to Peggy Carter? Did you watch her appearance in the First Avenger? You were already familiar with the character before the TV show?
Absolutely. I was super excited about the Captain America movie. We always saw the big Marvel movies for Lily's birthday because they're always launched around that first week of May. So we always end up going. Loved Captain America, of course. It's still, I think, my favorite Marvel movie just because I love Cap so much. He's my guy. And Peggy Carter's a fabulous character, and she was just right out of the chute. She was perfect and spot on. And when Agent Carter actually started, that was one of the shows that I watched all by myself with my glass of wine, with my feet up in the living room. This was my show just for me. So I enjoyed it from the get-go.
So it's in very good company. It's Agent Carter, Grey's Anatomy.
Black Sails.
Black Sails.
Basically, yes.
So the series is composed by Marcus and McFeely. They have the idea basically to build the entire series around Haley Atwell's spectacular, stellar
God, she's so
performance
good.
as
She's so
Peggy Carter.
freaking good.
But they fill out the cast with a couple of people from the movies. We get Dominic Cooper returning as Howard Stark. We get Neil McDonough returning as Dum Dum Dugan. I'm
Yes,
always
so
so
good.
happy to see him. And we bring in James Darcy as Edwin Jarvis. We
Oh
bring
my
in
God.
Chad Michael Murray as Jack Thompson.
Yes.
And
yes.
we bring in the brilliant Enver Gyokai as Daniel Souza. He is a Whedon alum. He first gained notoriety in
That's
Dollhouse.
right. In
Yes.
Dollhouse. Yes, I've
Where
heard
he
this.
just stunned me. I was so taken by his performance
Yeah.
in Dollhouse. He is one of the standout things in that show.
Oh,
He's
absolutely.
one of the reasons I want to go back to that show and watch it again. So the first season aired in January and February of 2015. As we said, 8 episodes. It is a mid-season replacement for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is a really nice thing for ABC to do, to break the seasons of S.H.I.E.L.D. with something else that is Marvel related. So they managed to hold the audience, but we get a different perspective. Unfortunately, they've kind of dropped the ball a little bit with that. We didn't get the Most Wanted series that they were planning for the longest time. This
My
was
heart.
the Mockingbird, the Bobby Morse series that we were going to get.
I'm so sad.
Sarah,
Why would
I'm so sorry.
Thank
I didn't
you.
know.
Thank you. Yeah.
Stranded in development
man.
hell,
Yeah.
but now we're getting the Inhumans, and that is going to fill the same slot. So hopefully that will work
Okay,
out
but
too.
Bobby's not there, so I don't care.
Okay,
all
so
right?
let me ask you
Yeah,
this,
this
Sarah.
is-
If you could have season 1 of Marvel's Most Wanted or season 3 of Agent Carter, which would you pick?
Oh shit! Agency of Three, it's Agent Carter. Like, okay, listen.
So
Bobby's
passionate,
my girl.
you couldn't
yeah.
say words.
No, I could
Wow.
not.
That
Bobby is my
surprises me.
girl.
I'm very pleased,
and
though.
yeah, no, I love her very, very much. But like, she would have been in that show with Lance Hunter, and we all know how I feel about that.
Oh, fair.
How
yeah,
all
so-
right-thinking people feel about Lance Hunter. Yeah.
He's such a wanker. He was a little better in the comic, which we talked about whenever we did our Mockingbird episode. But
Yeah.
still, yeah. But no, absolutely, hands down, I would have taken a season 3 of Agent Carter on any day. God, I'd replace Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with that show in a heartbeat if I had that power.
Yeah, me
So
too.
did you watch Agent Carter as it was coming out? Did you watch it
No.
week to week with a glass of wine?
No,
as
I did
Elizabeth
not. No, I don't think I had any idea. I don't remember how I learned about this. It must have been from you, Elizabeth.
It must have been. I
Yeah.
think you were at camp. So
Probably
that's-
so,
'cause
yeah.
I was actually this was when I had one of the rare times in my life I actually had TV. So cable somehow.
Oh, yeah,
Because
wow.
I
When
actually
was the last
watched
time that
it
happened?
with commercials
I
and all of
guess
that.
2015,
Yeah.
January and February
Thereabouts.
2015.
Must have been.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't even. God, I wasn't even engaged yet or anything. I wasn't even dating Nathan yet at that point. So yeah, no, I was still, I was down at camp. But yeah, you must have just talked about it. And as we've talked about previously on the show before, for the longest time, I thought I didn't like Captain America: The First Avenger because I was a moron. No, it's fine now. You're making faces at me, Elizabeth.
I'm
Don't
sorry.
worry about it.
Okay.
I do love that movie.
Okay.
Have you listened to this podcast? I had to apologize a lot.
Sarah came into Excelsior thinking that she didn't like Captain America and didn't like the Captain America movies, and we've discovered over the course of the last 15 episodes of Excelsior that in fact Sarah likes Captain America quite a lot.
As well, you should.
Well, okay, here's the thing. I always liked Cap. I just didn't think that I enjoyed his movies. But then going back and
okay.
rewatching them for this show, I was like, I have been a complete dullard. These movies are fantastic.
Yeah, they are very different in tone, which
Yes.
speaks to me because I like that kind of, especially in the first one where you get, kind of the World War II stories I like anyway, and there's that fun 40s vibe, which
Sure.
always speaks to me, but
Right.
it's not your jam. So that
Right,
actually,
exactly.
yeah, that's fine.
No, so it tracks. But don't worry, everyone. I have made my apologies. I've given of myself to the world to say I am sorry for this thing. I was
fine.
wrong. But yeah, so I guess it must have been you telling me about it, and then I don't know, I probably pirated it or something. I don't even remember the first time I watched this show. I just know that when I did finally, I was like, this is everything I've ever wanted. This
Right.
is amazing. This is fantastic. I am in love with Peggy Carter.
Right.
And you're traditionally not terribly interested in period dramas.
Correct.
Right? This historical context is not something that necessarily speaks to you.
Right, like, I
whereas
can enjoy
Elizabeth,
them. Yeah,
you're
yeah.
caught up in period dramas.
Yes.
Right,
The
but it's-
evocation of another time and place is something very high on your list of
Sure.
wants.
Whereas I just want, people kicking other people's butts, and that rarely happens in period dramas.
It's so nice that you get both in this series.
Yes, it's a perfect storm.
We're going to move through this episode by episode. We're going to spoil the hell out of everything, but we're going to begin by talking about our core cast. And I guess my first question is this. We have professed our love for Steve Rogers, for Captain America. He is an icon in the MCU. He is an icon in modern pop culture. What is it about Peggy Carter that makes her the perfect woman for him. Why
Before
is
we
there
do that,
romance?
really super quick, did you know that Captain America is going to have a beard in Infinity War, Elizabeth?
I did know this.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's good,
Yes.
right?
You think that isn't the wallpaper on her phone right now?
Okay, so Peggy Carter, why is she great?
Why is Peggy Carter great? She's uncompromising, which is, of course, one of the things that we love so much about Captain America, about Steve Rogers.
Would you say that she plants herself like a tree by the river of truth?
And says, no, you move. Yes, she does. Yes, she does. And I like that a lot about her. I think that, uncompromising is the word that comes to mind whenever I think of Peggy Carter at all. She's wonderful.
Yeah. I think that I always just really appreciated how capable she was and how that was never a question. I mean, obviously, you know, the other guys working in the SSR, they're making her do coffee runs, they're making her do paperwork, whatever. But like, we as the audience and Peggy also know how capable Peggy is.
Yeah.
We see that Jarvis learns that. Howard Stark knows that from the get-go. He knows that she's like the only one that he can trust to get him out of this trouble he's gotten himself into. And I just loved how strong she is. And also, I really, really appreciated, even though at the time I had yet to come into my own like feminine awakening or whatever. But I appreciated how, like, Elizabeth just showed me a Haley Atwell quote talking about, you know, how she really thought that it was important that girls are able to look at Peggy Carter and see that they do not have to put aside their femininity in order to be strong and be capable and be heroic. And I think that that was something that really spoke to me, even though I didn't. It's like whenever we went to go see Wonder Woman and it spoke to me a lot and I didn't understand why. I think that this was a very like smaller version of that.
I think it's fair to say that in the MCU up to this point and even past this point, we have a tradition of depicting our kick-ass heroines as something less than feminine. There was, of course, the huge controversy over Natasha's fertility and her ability to bear children and the degree to which that makes her less than a complete woman, which I don't think is entirely valid
Really
in a
don't think
reading
that
of the
was
text.
what the argument was, but okay. Yes.
Well, but there is an argument surrounding
There is an argument surrounding that, and I
certainly
see where
it's
people
fair
went
that when
there.
we look at S.H.I.E.L.D., we have Melinda May, who is, you know, very, very quiet and very focused and not terribly expressive. She's
Sure.
not terribly celebratory of her own femininity.
And we see her like not like whenever she has to like dress up to go undercover, she always like hates it, where she's like smiling so much that her face hurts and all this
Right.
kind of stuff. So it really is this sort of thing where, I mean, exactly what you're saying, Alistair, where we tend to replace the femininity with like this like awesome level of kick-ass. It's
Yes.
like it's almost as though we're being told you cannot be both of these things.
Right.
And yet,
Well, and
we
you
have
don't
Peggy.
have to be both of these things. Femininity does not mean all things to all people, but it's interesting that Peggy Carter does occupy this different perspective or fulfills a different perspective on that kind of capability and that kind of characterization. The thing that makes me love Peggy Carter the most, in the first Avenger in particular, is that she falls for Steve before he is Captain America.
Yeah.
Is that she sees the goodness in the man, and it isn't about the fact that he looks like, you know, Chris Evans.
And in Agent Carter, whenever you see her with the picture that she carries around of Steve, it's pre-serum Steve.
Yeah.
And that speaks to my heart very much.
It's just a beautiful thing.
Scrawny little Steve Rogers.
So we're introduced to Peggy Carter in the context of Agent Carter in 1946, where she is working for the Strategic Scientific Reserve, the SSR, the proto-SHIELD organization that is responsible for, you know, mad science in the MCU at this point. This is just our, wow, we live in a crazy world, you guys. Turns out Howard Stark can do dumb things, and he does them a lot.
Okay. Since this is a safe space, will y'all break down for me what the SSR actually is? Because I feel like Peggy's upstairs in this like FBI unit of it, like the
Yeah.
agent guys. Then we've got like the scientists downstairs in the basement. I do not see where these two people are, where these two like divisions are working hand in hand.
The SSR is canonically kind of like the FBI. It's a federal organization. It's not a military organization, which is why they are agents and not, you know, holders of military rank. But it is dedicated to the control of scientific excess, basically. They are controlling the things, the weapons and the other technologies that are now available in this world, because this is a supernatural world.
So we saw in the one shot at the end there, Howard ends up calling and says, you know, Peggy is now like head of S.H.I.E.L.D. She's going to be running S.H.I.E.L.D. with me.
Yeah.
So were the SSR and S.H.I.E.L.D. like working
Yes.
alongside each other for a time? And then when did the SSR dissolve?
Canonically in the comics, I believe S.H.I.E.L.D. grows out of the SSR, and
Okay.
certainly by the time we get to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., when they're looking back at the SSR, that is the understanding.
Right.
Is that
Peggy Carter actually held this, yelled
Right, I
Emma
remember.
Simmons.
exactly.
The founder, right?
The founder of
Simmons.
S.H.I.E.L.D.
The fact that Simmons is a fangirl for Peggy Carter
It's kind of the greatest thing.
I
Yeah.
love that. I
Yes.
love
Love
that
it.
so much.
Yes.
It's just perfect. It's better even than Coulson being a fangirl of Cap. I love it so much. So yeah, the SSR is basically, yes, it is Proto-Shield, the non-canonical beat at the end of the one shot where actually Shield has been founded alongside the SSR is interesting, but it does raise some interesting questions about whether or not Shield is a federal organization, whether Shield is a strictly American organization.
Is it a private organization?
It's certainly not private.
People know about it. This is my curiosity. Like, do you have to be
Well,
in the know, or is
here's
it like
the
everybody
thing.
knows
Here's the
about the
thing.
CIA, but nobody knows who's in the CIA or whatever
Right,
it is?
right.
Yeah.
The SSR is supposed to be kind of a covert organization, but then halfway through the first season of Agent Carter, we just have our agents flashing badges that clearly
Right.
say SSR on them.
Thank you.
And people clearly know about this.
So
they're
but it's like this secret, pretending it's the telephone company place. Too.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of confusion for me about what this place is and is
They're
not.
like FBI adjacent, but like, I don't know. Is it just one of those things where like anybody who flashes a badge at you with an acronym on it, you're just not going to question? Like,
We just really wanted our initials to spell SSR.
yes.
Work a little harder on that, you guys. Let's work a little harder on that.
Well, they named Shield because of Steve Shield. I mean, if Peggy was the founder, she did that.
Oh, that is my headcanon.
yeah, I like that. Sure.
I like that very much. And then she just tasked Jarvis with coming up with a suitably inscrutable acronym.
He spent out. You know that Anna ended up taking care of that, right? Like,
We can't talk about Anna because
I know,
Anna Jarvis
I
is
know.
not in the first season.
Only as her voiceover.
At some point in the future. We will reconvene to talk about the slightly more problematic and padded season 2 of Agent Carter.
But you get Anna
But
Jarvis, and that's like
As
so
you
worth.
know, here on Excelsior, we are nothing if not disciplined. So we are sticking to the first
Yes.
8 episodes with no discussion. So we have Peggy as our focal point for the entire season. We are rarely outside of her POV. She is dynamic and active and well motivated and just this beautiful fragile character who is still embodying such profound strength because we meet her in the midst of heartbreak. It has been a year since Steve died, and it is hard for us as viewers of the MCU to remember Steve wasn't lost in the Arctic. He's not frozen for 60
Right.
years. I mean, ultimately he will be, but at this point
Nobody
he's
knows that.
just dead.
Dead and gone.
And the shadow that Steve casts over the entire series of Agent Carter, some of my favorite moments are simply Peggy and Howard talking about Steve.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my
and
gosh, when
talking
they have
about
that huge argument.
iconography.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful. Let's move through the rest of our cast and then we'll break down our story. I suppose we should probably talk a little about James Darcy as Edwin Jarvis, Howard Stark's right-hand man, his butler, his valet, his go-to guy, who turns into just my favorite character in the series. There, I
love
said
him
it.
so much. Yeah.
Elizabeth, Edwin Jarvis.
I love Edwin Jarvis now. He actually took me just a little bit of warming up to because he
really?
was just a little silly in the context of the show for me. So it took
That
me a
makes
second
sense.
because
Sure.
I mean, and this is a thing that happens to me all the time. There are certain shows that's my problem with Doctor Who. Like when it slips into that kind of somewhat farcical just silliness, I start to lose interest
Yeah.
really quickly. And of course, this never goes anywhere as far as that. But Edwin Jarvis is that character who's occasionally just a fool. And
yes.
I
Yeah.
don't. That doesn't always speak to me, especially when he does become such a lovable and respectable character.
Yes.
When he is holding his own, when he's showing his loyalty and his competence, is when he speaks to me the most. And at first, he was just kind of silly and
Just kind of a
foppish
bumbling,
and-
oh, you
Yes,
popped a
bumbling.
button, that kind of thing.
Yes, and that also was very difficult for me because of the casting. Because I don't think that James Darcy necessarily carries that as easily as he does the heavier moments in the show, which he
Oh,
does
that's interesting.
so
Yeah, they
beautifully for me.
definitely cast for the best Jarvis.
Yes.
And they left him to handle the less good Jarvis,
Right.
I think. He
I
does
think
struggle
so.
a little bit with some of that physical comedy in particular. He's
Sure.
a very gifted actor, but you're right. For those heavy emotional moments, particularly right at the end of the first season when he returns the vial of
Oh,
Steve's
gosh.
blood
Okay.
to
He's
Peggy.
beautiful.
In apparent direct contravention of Howard Stark's instructions. That's just... It's lovely.
And
It's
even
just
those moments
lovely.
where he's just like telling a little lie and feeling
Yes.
squeamish and uncomfortable are darling and wonderful.
Yes.
But you're right. It's like the big physical comedy moments that I feel like I just don't buy it quite as much.
Sure, yeah.
And his rich inner life. The fact that he has a wife through this
Yes.
entire season and we don't meet her. Jarvis has
Well, what
other
happens at 8
things
o'clock?
going on.
My wife and I go to bed.
We should say, too, that this is a really great bit of comics continuity here, too.
Oh.
In the comics, Tony Stark has a butler named Jarvis, who eventually turns into the butler for basically all of the Avengers.
Yeah,
Jarvis
he's actually
is just-
in the Unstoppable Wasp comic
Yes.
right now,
Yes.
helping Nadia Pym get her citizenship in America.
Jarvis is just the butler for the Avengers. But here we get the origin of this archetype. Edwin Jarvis is a man among men and is possessed of such extraordinary integrity. His ability to see Miss Carter clearly
Yes.
just warms my heart every time it's exhibited. He's just great. I love James Darcy. Elizabeth, I think you're entirely right that he struggles a little more with the comedic moments, but he delivers these heartbreaking moments of sincerity,
Yes.
of truth, of integrity.
I
It's
keep wanting to
just
talk about
beautifully
season two.
done.
I know,
We can't
because
do
I
that
know
yet.
we
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
yet
Season
talk
two, but
about
we're not
season
there.
two.
We'll
Yeah.
get there.
Let's move on from Jarvis and talk about some of our SSR agents. Would you rather talk about Sousa first or Thompson first?
Let's talk about Thompson first.
Let's talk about
first.
Thompson
Yeah,
first.
I would
Chad
agree.
Michael Murray playing Jack Thompson. He is a direct antagonist to Peggy for much of the season, but he's also a more interesting and sophisticated character than you would
Yes.
initially think. You guys, this last time through Agent Carter, which I've now watched in the course of the last week, I found myself really liking Jack Thompson. No, let me qualify that a little. I found myself really liking Chad Michael Murray.
Because Jack Thompson is an ass.
Jack Thompson is the worst.
Here's the thing about Jack Thompson. He is a lot, like every time he's on screen, anytime that he calls Peggy Marge, I want to punch him so
Yeah.
hard in the face. It's like, that is not her name, and you know that,
Yep.
you asshat. But he just, God, I love watching him on screen. I think that Chad Michael Murray does an amazing job. It just, yeah, I don't know. I hate his guts, and I love being able to do that. Like, it's in a very fun way.
But he's also fundamentally kind of a good guy. I mean, he's
Yeah.
the bruiser of the SSR squad, apparently. He's brought in for the heavy interrogations, which I like quite a lot. But he also has
We're
a
going to need a new
sense...
stick.
he also has a sense of justice.
Yeah.
I understand why he is working for the SSR. He isn't just a bad guy. And I love that throughout the series, we get great perspectives on heroism and on villainy, on human frailty and foible. That works really, really well for me. So Thompson is interesting. Elizabeth, how did he work for you the first time through? Or how did he work for you the last time through?
I love Jack Thompson, and I don't feel like I have to even qualify it. I mean, I think that he is a complicated character.
Yeah.
though. I mean, yes, he's an asshat sometimes, and he's a misogynist. He is a product of his time,
Yes.
very much, though, in the same way that Dooley is. We'll get to Dooley, I'm sure. But I think that Jack Thompson he has a great arc throughout the series. And I think the performance by Chad Michael Murray is fantastic. The costuming on this guy is really great.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he levels up just a little bit with the fashion. Like, he looks like a fashion plate for this time period in a way that
Yeah,
the other
no, he
men in the
does.
show do not.
You're right, yeah.
He absolutely does. So he takes this kind of extra care in his look also. God, the costuming in the show is fantastic across the board. That must have been somebody's dream. God, they must have had so much fun with all the hats and the...
And they do the most difficult thing with a period drama, which is they take these slightly outlandish fashions, the high-waisted pants, the tiny little ties, wow, those lapels, you guys.
The
I think
lapels!
The
the lapels
fedoras.
on Dooley's suit are probably the
Yes.
inspiration for, Sam's Falcon suit. That's how Stark got that idea. We could just broaden those a little bit and you could fly. And yet they take these ridiculous fashions and make them look fantastic, which
Yeah.
I have to say they don't always do in season 2. The transition to LA in season 2 means the fashions are a little bit more
We
difficult.
keep saying
Peggy
we're
in
not gonna talk
particular.
about season
I know,
2, and yet-
and there I am. I broke the cardinal rule. Okay, let's not talk about season 2. Let's instead talk about Daniel Sousa. Let's talk about
my
our cinnamon
gosh.
roll. Let's talk about our sweet, sweet, soft boy, Daniel Sousa. He is such a good guy. And we get to see how haunted he is by his injury. And Enver Gyokai, of course, is just a preposterously talented actor. I have no
yeah.
trouble at all saying that he is among the most talented actors currently working on television. The physicality with which he approaches his crutch in particular is astonishing. It is so consistent. And you would expect any other show, any other performance to kind of dial that down a bit.
Yes, yeah. I had forgotten exactly how dependent he is on the crutch until we get to that season finale and you see him in that big warehouse and he's got that
Yes.
long cross all the way. And because usually he's just in the office and you just
Yeah.
he takes 4 or 5 steps and you see it, but you don't really register, especially when it's a shot that's, from the waist up or whatever. But the physicality for the performance is extraordinary. And he has a soulfulness that makes him perfectly cast, I think.
Yeah.
The fact that anybody can hold a candle to Steve Rogers and makes me think, sure, I can see Peggy on a date with this guy, or not even on a date with this guy. Like, I can see Peggy snuggling up next to this guy to watch the evening news, sipping her tea. And that's real big, you guys.
Well,
That's
and we
Well,
talked
the
about
evening
this.
news will probably be about Peggy, so it's
Probably
appropriate
so,
that
yeah.
they watch it together.
And we talked about this when we did our episode on the Winter Soldier, where we get that clip of Peggy in the museum talking about her husband and how
Yes.
Steve like saved her husband during the war and all this. And at the time, we were like, okay, that's totally Sousa, though, right? And then you reminded me that Marcus and McFeely were, writing that film, and then also like created Agent Carter
Yep.
and did this whole thing. So yes, 1,000,000,000,000%, Peggy and Sousa do get married.
And then something happens, because it is certainly implied later in Peggy's life that she is not romantically attached. I don't know. We'll have to do a whole Peggy Carter breakdown as we move through all the movies. That means we're
into that.
going to have to watch Ant-Man again, you guys.
Whoops.
I'm sorry that this has happened to all of us, but yeah,
She's in Ant-Man, and she punches not Dominic Cooper, Howard Stark.
John Slattery,
John
Howard Stark.
Slattery, Howard Stark.
Let me tell you there were 2 Howard Stark theories. I don't really have one. It's just that 2 actors played that same character. It's pretty fine.
Either that or he made another serum where he got to shoot up 6 inches or so.
We should also talk about Shea Wiggum as Roger Dooley, Chief Dooley, the head of the SSR.
I love Chief
And
Dooley.
apparently just the New York office of the SSR is just the entirety of the SSR, I guess, at this point.
There's only, it seems like 15 guys until the series finale, where again, suddenly there's like 30 guys upstairs. Like, I don't know any of these
There's
asshats. What's going on?
probably at least there's like an East Coast and West Coast SSR, right?
Well,
Like that was
no.
eventually how we end
Season
up.
two.
We know that there isn't because it's set up in season 2.
Oh yeah.
This may be the
Where are
only
these
SSR
guys?
office.
Maybe there's an extra. I mean, there's just more floors that we haven't seen.
I think that's probably it.
Yeah.
There's another
Yeah.
floor too. Or,
I have no idea how the geography of that building works out. It's very strange, but I like it quite a lot.
Yes.
I do like the set from the one shot. The set from the one shot is almost identical to the set that we get in the TV show. Dooley's office is
close.
almost identical. The kind of bullpen layout of the office itself is almost identical. There's even kind of a conference room on the other side, which is really nice and gives you
Yes.
that dynamism of crossing the bullpen to get there. What I love about the one shot set is that the staircase ascends directly into the bullpen.
Yeah.
Which is so great and so dramatic. And I wish we'd kept that for the show. I completely understand why we didn't, because that means you have to elevate the set in its entirety.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But I wish we'd kept that, because for dramatic reasons, having Peggy come up the stairs into the office every day would have just been tremendous.
Yeah.
I would have been
Just a beautiful thing to watch.
super into that.
Sure.
What do we think of Dooley as a presence in the show? Because he's clearly supposed to be something of an embodiment of the patriarchy at
Yeah.
this point. He is just as critical and just as dismissive of Carter as anyone else, but he also serves later in the season to mediate between Jack Thompson and Daniel Sousa. He's kind of the ethos to our pathos and logos arguments here.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, sure.
What do we think of that performance? Do we like the performance first?
I
Do we
love
like
the
Shea Wiggum
performance.
as
Yes,
Dooley?
no, I think
really
he's
do.
great. Yeah,
Yeah. By the
absolutely.
time we get all the stuff with him and Dr. Russian, once he's talking about his family and his wife, and we get those little scenes where he's
Oh
interacting
yeah,
with
with
them
his
a bit.
kids. Oh
He's
man, and then he
really
gets
lovely.
the deadly vest put on him, and just
Yeah.
oh geez.
Well, and even when he's starting to doubt whether or not Howard Stark is the bad guy that we think he is, and I love his interaction with Jarvis, where he says, you know, there are 3 sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth. I'm just looking for the truth.
yeah, yeah.
I really like that. That's a
He
that
grows
is his
into the
character.
role. I think I like him a lot as the season progresses. He is a little flat and maybe even a little
He's flat in the
a
beginning.
little superfluous at the beginning, except that had it simply been Thompson and Sousa, then we might not have felt the kind of systematic dismissal of Peggy Carter as a character. And because there are 2 of them, because this is institutionalized,
Yeah,
that she
sure.
is the girl who gets the coffee and the girl who gets the lunch, and that's pretty much it. I think that helps us understand why she feels the way that she does,
Yeah.
particularly given her service record by this point.
Yeah.
We should also talk about some of our supporting characters. Let's begin with Bridget Regan playing Dottie Underwood.
She is so good.
Isn't she amazing?
Do you remember the first time you saw Dottie freaking ninja kick her way off a wall and tackle a dude to the ground to steal his automatic pistol?
It was
What
pretty amazing.
amazes me is how long they take to set her up.
Yeah.
true.
Because they
Yeah.
bring her in really like she's just another comic relief character, which
Mm-hmm.
I adore. And then we get maybe 4 or 5 scenes with her before the reveal, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they're spread over 2 episodes. And
Yes.
they really build a sense of who this character is. And then the reveal when it comes is just fantastic. And another bit of MCU lore, because we're connecting back to the Red Room. We're
Yeah.
connecting back to
Right. Yes,
Which
absolutely.
I'm
the
always
Russian
into.
propensity for training little girls to be ninja assassins. It's pretty good. She's terrifying.
She's so scary.
Yeah.
She has just enough of just the crazy eye.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's nutso.
We can also talk about Lindsay Fonseca as Angie Martinelli. Sarah, you love Angie.
I love Angie.
You kind of love Angie and Peggy.
I kind of do, actually. I ship it. Whatever. I ain't ashamed. I would marry Angie and have her babies in a heartbeat.
How does Angie work for you, Elizabeth?
I like Angie a lot. She sometimes I have problems with her. Sometimes I think she can be a little bit sulky, and I just want to smack her around. But most of the time, I think that she's lovely. I think every time she's at work, especially, she really works for me.
That's such
she
a
works
great
for me
set, too.
less as the neighbor until we have the scene where everybody comes in searching for Peggy.
Yeah.
And that's when she really works for me. But every time that we see her in that diner and in the little outfit and practicing her lines, it's adorable.
I like her a lot more when she's not being an actress. The actress who wants to be an actress who is a bad actress and is playing the role of a bad actress. I've seen that before, you guys.
No, I hear you.
Saw
I
that
hear
with Cordelia Chase in Angel many years ago, and I'm not sure that I need to see it many more times in my life. But yeah, Angie as the friend, I think is just great. And as another perspective on Peggy's life in the context of the Griffith Hotel, I think she works just great. Let's also talk about our Howard Stark. Dominic Cooper comes back to this show, and not a little bit. He's in 5 episodes, which is pretty great. Do you guys like Dominic Cooper as
really
a perspective
do.
on Howard Stark, thus a perspective on Tony Stark? Do you buy this guy?
I really, really do. I mean,
Yeah.
he totally works for me. Absolutely. I mean, he worked for me in The First Avenger. He works for me throughout this entire series. Less so in season 2, but we're not talking about that.
I don't remember him in season 2. So okay.
Yeah, well, he was there.
Whoa.
Sorry. But no, he totally worked. I love everyone works for me in this show. Sorry, guys. This is one of those things where I have a hard time being critical because I love everyone and we're all just having a great time.
Howard Stark, Elizabeth?
I actually do see him as the father of the Robert Downey Jr. version of Tony. So he has a playfulness that I think that we don't get when we see John Slattery playing the role. And I think that works very well. And even just the coloring works for being the father of the Tony Stark that we've come to know and love and hate a little bit.
Finally, we have Ralph Brown playing Dr. Ivchenko for the back half of the season.
He does a great job.
Turns out to be our primary antagonist. It's interesting that you say that. Tell me more about the great job that he does.
I just remember being like legit scared of this guy. And like, I mean, maybe that's because Dottie was with him and I'm actually horrified of Dottie. That might have been it.
That certainly speaks to my experience. I find him less compelling than Dottie, certainly, and less compelling than honestly pretty much any other performer. And I think that's just because he's a little underwritten, a little undermotivated.
Yeah,
That's what
well,
I
we
was
only get him
thinking.
in what, like 3 episodes?
4, yeah. But,
okay.
I mean, it's the back half of the season. He's there quite a lot. I don't hate him in the Russian episode in which he's recruited to the SSR, which we later find out is all part of his master plan because he has some weird ability to make master plans, I guess.
I didn't buy that part at all of this.
And you were bothered by the hypnosis too, weren't you?
I'm just tired of it. Yeah. And it wasn't even well done. Just like slightly playing with his ring. Like at least give us, the glint of light off of it or something. I mean, give us a little bit more. Yeah, that part doesn't really
Particularly
work
by the end of the season when he's able to hypnotize people in like 10 seconds flat.
Not even that.
I know. I feel like the
The
MCU
word focus.
Yeah.
Like, come on now.
The MCU has like set up this idea that, I mean, we see it with Bucky in the Winter Soldier and also Civil War. I mean, like just the Russians have hypnotism like down pat.
Just a
like
thing.
just
Yeah.
a few words and they gotcha.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's
so.
what was, and the Red Room too, I suppose, to a certain extent. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. It would have been nice if we'd given him some kind of mechanic that would have allowed him to
Right.
express this in a more kind of supernatural, a more convincingly MCU way. Just talking
Maybe
in a
he's
soft
an
voice and an
Inhuman.
inconvincing accent is
See,
not.
that would have been better for me. It would
Yeah,
have been harder
maybe
to
we just
set up,
didn't.
but
we
that
just-
would have been better.
Yeah,
for
we
me.
never came across it. Like it just never came up. But like maybe he's an Inhuman and that's his power.
So with all of that said, let's get into our discussion of the 8 episodes which constitute this, the first season of Agent Carter. We begin with Now Is Not the End, which is a great episode title. Most of these episodes, in fact, have great episode titles.
Yes.
In 1946, we meet Peggy Carter a year after the death of Steve Rogers. She's working for the SSR, and Howard Stark is in some trouble, you guys. This is basically our primary plot for the season. We're going to talk about Leviathan, and we're going to get into the mechanics of that plot, but really, We're here to talk about Howard Stark, and we're here to talk about Howard Stark's transition from wartime hero, industrialist, capitalist, man's man, ladies' man, man about town, Howard Stark. What is it? Billionaire?
Billionaire playboy philanthropist.
Billionaire playboy probably millionaire?
Probably
Would he be a
millionaire.
billionaire in
Yeah, no,
1946?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think you were just a millionaire.
I don't know. It's Howard
money
Stark.
meant more then, so.
So what did you guys make of that plot, our hard introduction to that plot? The idea that Howard Stark is now a traitor and has been selling his weapons technology to anyone who will buy it. It's the Russians. It's always the Russians, you guys. And I guess some mob guys in New York.
Sure, yeah.
Howard Stark has a very, expensive Rolodex at this point in history. Were you engaged by that, by the presence of Howard Stark? Did this speak to you as a plot full of intrigue?
I think Stark is really fun just because I do love the idea of all the big inventions and the crazy science. The only part that I thought did throw me just a little bit is Stark asserting that they were friends, that they were this close friends, which I did not feel like I necessarily got from the Captain America movie. I felt like there was kind of a considerable eye roll that we were getting.
Didn't they fondue? No, he asked about fonduing.
No, yeah, they didn't actually fondue. He asked about it. They did not exactly. And
Fondant, if you will. That's different.
And wasn't there a line too about how Stark once tried to kiss her and she shoved him into the Thames? So it's like
I
I
thought
feel
that she
like
was
they are
making that
not
up.
buds.
Oh, I have no trouble believing that that's true.
Yeah.
Oh, is it also true?
But I think that that's probably the moment where they became friends. I think that Howard Stark's response to, wait, you're a woman and you
Okay.
don't want me?
Sure.
I am into you. Yeah, this is something unparalleled,
Gross.
unprecedented in my life. So we get the plot about the molecular nitramine, which is a horribly explosive and devastating weapon, of course.
God, that entire sequence is so damn good. Whenever she's like on the phone with Jarvis and he's like telling her how to, deactivate this explosive thing that's in her tiny, tiny apartment bathroom. It's very good.
It's really very good indeed. And this is where we see Peggy take action on her own initiative. The SSR is not interested in this version of the story. We haven't yet begun to approach the idea that perhaps Howard Stark has been set up. He is just public enemy number one. So Carter performs her own investigation and we get the introduction of Spider Raymond and his club, the Silent Leet Brannis, which is a great name that they keep saying through the entire show. Leet Brannis is
Yes.
very good. If anyone out there in the listening audience is pregnant right now and you know that you're going to have a son, consider the name Leet Brannis. He's, Leet. He will grow up to be a video game professional. There's only so much that you can do about that. Leet Brannis McElroy. McElroy is a very good surname. Let's do that. So here we get Peggy going undercover. She disguises herself with the dress, which is
pretty fantastic.
good Lord, the blonde wig. She
The American accent.
She infiltrates the club. She gets into the safe. She discovers that the formula has already, in fact, been turned into a weapon. And by the time that Jack Thompson gets there, Jack Thompson spends so much of the season just following along slightly behind Peggy,
Yes.
which I love quite a lot.
Pretty great.
It's
which also
really
does
quite
show
good.
that he is actually good at his job.
Right.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
a really legitimate point, Elizabeth.
Yes.
That the SSR is capable, but they're kind of blinded. The enemy here is not incapability. It's ignorance and prejudice, which I adore as a major theme, particularly with a strong heroine like Agent Carter. So by the time Jack Thompson shows up on the scene, Spider Raymond is dead. We get the run-in with the man in the green suit, the voiceless man who Peggy throws out
yes.
of a window. But much more importantly, we get the photograph. We get the photograph of Peggy from behind, which Daniel Souza is going to spend, I am not kidding, the entire season looking at.
Yep.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
He's
Is this your
falling in
job,
love.
Daniel?
He's
Is this
falling
your
in
job,
love.
though? He's falling in love with this woman.
The brain is like, no, you need this. Look at the picture, Daniel.
So from there, Jarvis takes Carter to the Roxxon oil refinery, and we meet Dr. Vanko, Dr. Anton Vanko.
Yes.
Another bit of continuity with the MCU here, because this is the father of Whiplash, the Mickey Rourke character in Iron Man 2.
Why the hell not?
Why the hell not? It's surprising, actually, how much Iron Man there is. For all that this is ostensibly a kind of Captain America adjacent story,
Sure.
it's really a Tony Stark adjacent story,
Yes.
because we get his father.
Lots of Stark,
Of course,
sure.
lots of Stark tech, Stark Industries, and we also get some callbacks to the Iron Man movies. So Carter finds Brannis mass producing the nitramine weapon at the refinery. He, too, has the scar where his voice box has been removed, which is a really interesting and very creepy beat that connects all the way through the season, right to the end, when we find out about the
Right.
deployment of the gas on the Eastern Front, which is actually really very serious and dark. And I love the way that this show
Surprisingly
can
dark at the tail end of this
navigate
show.
these things.
Yeah.
Is this a valid criticism? We basically wrap up the episode with the introduction of Leviathan. We're going to get this whispered word that is going to be ominous through the entire season. Do you feel that the first season is kind of tonally compatible with the rest of the season? Do we feel as though it's serious, or is this kind of quirky and whimsical New York adventures in 1946? Because by the time we get to the end of the season, we're going to be dealing with, actual war crimes and actual devastation and the removal of agency from very powerful individuals. There are going to be some really serious themes underlying this entire season. Does the first episode work as an introduction to that template, or does it work better as an introduction to the world of Peggy Carter?
I feel like it does both pretty well.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't really see any inconsistency. At least, I mean, the first episode is so strong. I feel like it's such a strong pilot. It's such a strong opener for what the show is going to be. And Elizabeth and I were talking about this and how not season 2, but episode 2 can't quite match up to just like how great episode 1 is.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know, like I really do feel like it does do a good job of like, here are the adventures of Peggy. Also, shit's going down, y'all.
Yeah, things are real, and we're going to continue to deal with serious threats
Yeah.
to the entire, early MCU here. So by the end of that episode, we get the brilliant implosion at the Roxxon oil refinery, which again is going to be a major beat through the entire season. And we get Brannis escaping with the truck full of nitramine bombs, and then we get the little cap of Jarvis calling Stark to say that Miss Carter is an excellent choice. I love Edwin Jarvis.
I just remembered, Elizabeth, that you watching this show is the first time I ever saw this show, because I did come in at the very tail end of this episode and I was like, what are you watching? And you were like, oh, it's Agent Carter. And I said, is it any good? And you were like, yeah. Yes.
So thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
For that. The first episode does a lot of setup, but I think we still get some really great sequences, and we get to see Peggy Carter's capability, which is the greatest thing about this show, right?
It ain't no small thing, that's
It ain't
for sure.
no small thing.
That ain't nothing. It's not nothing.
Into episode 2, Bridge and Tunnel, where we get the introduction of Angie Martinelli. Angie begins the second episode by offering a room at the Griffith to Peggy. This is where Peggy kind of decides that she wants to integrate a little more with a normal life, whatever that means
But
for
also
her.
wants to avoid that because Colleen did just get killed, is the other
Which
thing.
is fair.
Yeah.
Absolutely fair.
Colleen,
Yes.
her original roommate there at the apartment, who was murdered by Lead Brannis.
By Leet Brannis.
Yeah.
Who hasn't been murdered by Leet Brannis at least once? Again,
Well.
a great name for your children, ladies and gentlemen. So we get our opening movement with Carter posing as the health inspector and going to the Clover Dairy,
God,
the
that's
Daisy
adorable.
Clover Dairy.
She's
Her
so
in those
good.
glasses.
Just
Oh my
delightful.
God.
I have
so
a question.
cute.
Why can British people do American accents better than American people can do British accents?
Well, I don't think that's always the case, because remember Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, listen. First of all, Benny can do no wrong, except that accent was very bad.
Yeah.
It goes both ways.
Okay.
It really does go both
Well,
ways.
Haley Atwell is ridiculously talented in that case, because for a while, we thought she was an American actress, because we're dumb.
I don't think that's necessarily dumb. She has a commendable mastery of her accent.
It's
Well,
ridiculously
and she also
good.
has a way of doing, because a lot of times you just kind of get a flat generic American
Sure.
accent, but she will do regional dialects too, based on
Yes.
the character that she's decided that she is at this point of her undercover. She does like the kind of California accent she
Yeah.
does in season 2 really, really often, but this particular accent that she does for this girl, for the dairy gal, whoever she is from the food.
the
FDA,
health
I guess.
inspector.
Health
Great.
inspection.
Yes.
Yes, is totally different.
So
And maybe
here-
that's just more proof of like how capable Peggy is. I mean, like
I'd like to think it is,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it absolutely
Yeah.
is. Yes.
So here we see again the SSR overlooking Peggy's enormous capability. Duly dispatches Krasinski to go to the Roxxon oil refinery and try and figure out what happened there with the implosion, while he and Jack and Daniel go to visit the Roxxon CEO, Hugh Jones, because when you have a part that could be played by Ray Wise, you are legally required to hire Ray Wise to play that role. He is fantastic, and he sets up a plot that is actually going to be much more significant in season 2 than it is in the first season. And I don't think that was intentional. I think they just really like this characterization.
Yeah.
Why not?
But we cast some serious shade on the character of Howard Stark here. And we open up the possibility that Howard Stark has been continuing his experiments with Vita radiation, an important part of Project Rebirth, the super soldier project that created Captain America in the first place.
I guess
hey, you
Howard-
guys, that's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I
Just,
guess Howard
you know.
is kind of a skeevy guy. I mean, like, I love Howard Stark with all my heart and soul. I don't know if it's just that Dominic Cooper is like ridiculously charming, but Man,
Well, I think it's that he knows this about himself.
maybe so. I think that both Stark men do,
Yeah.
right? What is it about these Stark men that, I mean, what did you say earlier? Like, we love them and we love to hate them also?
Something like I don't know. Love to hate's a little strong, but yes,
Sure,
yes, I
yes.
think I did say that.
I
Yeah.
mean, we all like to call out Tony on how Age of Ultron is entirely his fault.
And even
But he
Peggy,
knows that.
right at the end of the
and that's
season,
what I think makes it work.
she doesn't want Steve Rogers' blood in the hands of America's leading capitalist,
Right.
as she says more than once. I think that's a great kind of observation about who Howard Stark really is.
Yeah.
That even when he's trying to do good, and we do get the justification through most of the series, that his inventions aren't outright weapons. They can be
Right.
weaponized, but his intent is always to create something more positive, which I don't know. I'm not sure how that fits for me with the
I
depiction
don't
of
even
Stark
know if
tech
his
that we
intent
get.
is to create something more positive or just something cool.
That
and he
may
doesn't
well be
think
it.
What is it?
about
He tried to make like some kind of razor that turns into like a laser death ray or something like that. Like, what were you thinking,
Look,
Howard?
who
How did
hasn't
this
done
work?
that? But we get, for example, the jacket that ultimately, the
Right.
little Kevlar vest that ultimately leads to the death of Chief Dooley is well intentioned. It's
That is true.
armor,
That's
first
very
off,
well
which
intentioned.
is
Yes,
reactive
yes.
and not proactive, and is supposed to keep soldiers warm on the Eastern Front, which I think we would agree would be a noble aspiration.
cause.
But he just can't do it. And I do think you're right that the rule of cool wins when you are Howard Stark,
Yeah,
which
for sure.
makes a lot of sense. So we go through all of the back and forth with the truck full of explosives, which is pretty great. We get the showdown on the Cliffside Road, which is
I really like that entire sequence. I think it's
awesome.
very, very good.
It's very, very good. And then we get the first moment of real, genuine intimacy between Carter and Jarvis right at the end of the episode when he's stitching up her wounds. He notes that she doesn't want to get close to anyone. He reminds her that she can't keep the world safe herself and that even she must learn to rely on her friends sometimes, which sends her back to Angie. And she
Right.
decides that she will, in fact, be Angie's roommate. I mean, roommate isn't quite the right word.
Neighbor?
Pretty
Neighbor.
close.
Neighbor is a better
neighbor,
word. In
less than
the
a
Griffith
roommate.
Hotel.
Yeah.
I love whenever Peggy walks back into the, I almost said laundromat, but that's not it. What is it called?
The automat.
The automat, yeah.
Yes.
Whenever she walks back in and Angie has been spurned by her and is very frustrated and her feelings are hurt. And then Peggy sits down and is just like, I just thought I would tell you about my day if you have time. Like, I love that. I love their relationship so much.
It's a very, very
Yes.
good relationship. And we kind of skipped over this a little earlier, Sarah, but you have a particular interest in Angie and Peggy together.
No,
You've read
no,
some
we did
fan
talk
fiction.
about this. No, I absolutely ship Cardinelli. I think it's really good. And frankly, so does Haley Atwell. They told her at one of the Comic-Cons that she wasn't supposed to mention it, but somebody apparently in the audience asked who they would... Someone asked Haley Atwell, like, who would you like to see Peggy Carter get with? And she just kept pointing at herself and then also at Lindsay because she wasn't supposed to say Angie's name.
What do you guys think of the Griffith Hotel? This is going to be one of our primary sets for the rest of the season, or one of our primary locations. Does it work for you, the somewhat austere and stern hotel for women?
I mean, I hate it. I hate the concept. I hate Miriam. Is that her name?
Yeah, Miriam.
God damn. No, I hate it. I do not like it.
You wouldn't like to live there if you were living in New York in 1946?
Peggy is just, she's too independent. She's too fierce. Get her out of there. I hate it. My
I would have
opinion.
lived there.
And then the beat that leads us into episode 3 is Krasinski finding the license plate for Howard Stark's car
Yes.
at the crater that used to be the Roxxon oil refinery, I
Oh,
guess.
yeah, of course.
That takes us into episode 3, which begins with Peggy acclimatizing to life in the Griffith Hotel, where we learn very early and very often that men are not allowed above the first floor.
No, absolutely not.
That's
Which
that's
means
a
we'll
vital
be taking
rule.
lots of men upstairs.
Yes.
That's
We're going to be
basically
doing
what
it
that
just
means. Yes.
all the time, just all the time. And there is a transition here into the third episode. I think I feel as though the first two were written together and were possibly written as like a proof of concept that this was the spec script that got Marcus and McFeely the show. Because it really feels as though as we move into the third episode, into the rest of the season. That this first adventure has now been resolved. We've dealt with the Roxxon oil implosion. We've dealt with the truck full of nitramine. We've dealt with everything that's outstanding. There are threads, the Leviathan, and obviously the involvement of Howard Stark. But now we're ready to do what the rest of the season is going to do.
Now, they had already done Winter Soldier at this point, right? Winter Soldier was 2014?
Yes.
And they were getting ready to do, Ultron came next and then...
Which is one of the reasons that we're throwing forward to the Red Room
Yes.
and the training of Russian assassins, because now we know that that is a part of Natasha Romanoff's backstory, and we know that it's a part of Bucky's experience too by this point, which is, a lot of Russians training a lot of assassins is what we get in the MCU.
What's up with the Russians? Just wanted to kill everybody,
Look,
man.
it's a primary industry is what I'm saying. It's pretty good. But this is certainly where we start to get more of the police procedural version
Sure.
of Agent Carter. We get a lot of investigation. We get investigations into Leet Brannis. We get the discovery of the typewriter with the long-range razor transmitter, which is also very cool.
My husband
Like,
has one of those straight razors, and I like to play with it a lot and pretend
very
that it's
cool.
an antenna for a Russian typewriter.
for Russian typewriters. It may be, you don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea.
You
I
just
don't know
need
how
to
this
find
stuff
the right
works.
typewriter to match it up. We also discover that Leet Brannis, who they found while searching for Stark, has apparently been 2 years dead already. He died during World War II, and Sousa is investigating the license
At the
plate.
Battle of Finau, right?
At the Battle
Right.
of Finau. Wow, that's going to be really relevant.
That probably
right there.
doesn't mean anything. I
Probably
mean, it's probably
not.
fine. Probably fine.
The anchor for the first part of episode 3, though, is Thompson and Sousa going to Jarvis and taking him in for questioning regarding the license plate. Here we get to see Edwin Jarvis pulled out of his more comfortable milieu, out even of his kind of secret agent milieu, into the world of the SSR. I love Edwin Jarvis.
He's so good. This is whenever we learn that he was dishonorably discharged
For treason.
For treason.
For treason.
I love the conversation that he and Peggy have later whenever Peggy realizes, oh, your wife was Jewish. And he goes, oh, she still is. Yes.
So great. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's really wonderful.
Jarvis forged the signature of his commanding officer during the war to get his Jewish wife out of Budapest during the war, obviously, and take her to the United States. He was therefore dishonorably discharged. And this is, we can see throughout this episode, I think, a real stain on his character. It is something that he struggles with himself, which is so true of this show. We're going to get a perspective on Jack Thompson later that suggests
Yes.
that he is not the hero that everyone believes him to be. Sousa is struggling, obviously, with his injury. Even Dooley is struggling with the prices that he has paid to do the very important work that he does. No one in this series is simple.
Yeah.
Which I like
That's
very much. That's
so
always something
powerful.
that's so important to me in the TV that I watch.
Now, does that reflect for the two of you a greater perspective on the MCU? Is this true of the MCU in general? Is this something that you get from Marvel stories, or do you find that Agent Carter is more, interesting in that regard than the movies or even Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
No, I do think that it tracks. I think that generally the MCU does a really good job of having very complicated characters. I mean, sometimes we'll get somebody who's like pretty flat, pretty cardboard cutout, basically what it says on the tin. But otherwise, I mean, I think about, just all of the movies that we've seen up to this point. At some point we're going to talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on this show in particular. And just how, I feel like they do a very good job of making these characters as real as possible. Like we don't have to, we make the joke that, Captain America is like capital G good and that's like his one thing, but like there's a lot going on with Steve Rogers and we see that there's a lot going on with all of these characters. Even, Hawkeye gets his day in Age of Ultron with his farm and his family, and I'm a Clint Barton apologist and I will never apologize for that. But no, I do think that it tracks. I think that generally the MCU does a very good job of at least, no, I'm trying to think of like in Guardians of the Galaxy, do we do the same kind of thing, or is it just here's a talking raccoon who is?
No, I think we do something very similar in Guardians, less so Guardians 1, but the theme
Sure.
of family that pervades Guardians 2, I think, kind of
Yes.
gives us at least a perspective, at least
Right.
an exploration and an explanation of the motivations of many of these characters, which I find particularly interesting. Elizabeth, you're attracted to characters who are capital G good. Cap is your guy. Do you find this exploration of kind of, in particular, this kind of fractured masculine identity that we get in the wake of the Second World War, these men who are theoretically at least good men who have been fractured by their experience. Does this speak to you? Do you find this compelling?
I think it's beautiful, yeah, and it's always been something that I think that that I've enjoyed, and I wish that we had more women in the show. Actually, I see why we don't. Like, I get that that's the whole point, is that she's so isolated as a
Right.
woman, but I think that they try to show that perspective pretty clearly, especially with the Jack Thompson character, who I really love that whole arc of his. And Dooley too, honestly. When Dooley shows his remorse for having chosen the job over his family because he was better at his job than his family.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting...
And his job was important. And
Was
in a
important,
sense,
sure.
he was still protecting his family by being
Yes.
chief of the SSR rather than being, a husband and father.
Right, yeah.
That's
A plumber with flat feet from New Jersey, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's a heartbreaking conversation. I love it, but it's tough to watch. So by the end of episode 3, we arrive at the boat where we find much of Howard Stark's missing technology after Carter and Jarvis go through the sewer together, which is pretty great, and have the conversation about Anna, which I just adore. We get the fight sequence in the hold of the ship, which I really like. We talked a little about the fight choreography in the Agent Carter one-shot, and the fact that it is superior to a lot of the fight choreography that we get in the show itself. I mean, they had a larger budget. They had more time. They only had to produce 10 minutes. Of course, it's going to be better. I actually really like the way that Peggy Carter fights, because it isn't, even within the frame of the show, the way that Dottie Underwood fights.
Right.
Dottie is trained. She is deadly. And Peggy is not. But what she is scrappy, and she exhibits.
She is great with like improvised weaponry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she won't give up, because you know what? The thing about Peggy Carter is she could do this all day. There it is.
How dare
I said
you?
It. But it's true.
Oh no, it's so true.
It is true. This is why she and Cap are so perfect together, because neither one of them will give up. We get Jarvis's call to the SSR, which is one of the comedic moments for Jarvis that works really
This
well,
one works
for,
well
me.
for me, yeah.
His obvious discomfort at faking an American accent is really rather beautiful.
Although
and
he does a great job, actually.
Yeah.
Hey, Mac.
Then the SSR investigates a few minutes too late, as they always do. Krasminski takes the man into custody, and that's it for Ray Krasminski.
I
you guys,
forgot that he gets shot in the face.
Yeah.
I
he does.
totally
It's
forgot.
Nasty.
Pretty early on, too.
Yeah, by Dottie. By all
Yeah.
accounts, we don't get to see her at this point because she
Oh,
hasn't yet
that's
been
true,
introduced.
but that makes sense because it seemed like an awfully lanky guy with a very small waist.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and then
Didn't
we
put
get
that
the
together.
we get the morning at the end of the episode, which is it's really good, and this
Actually
is
quite
Dooley
sweet.
kind of focusing his personal enmity on Howard Stark
Right.
here.
Right.
Stark didn't pull the trigger, but all of this is his fault, and we get
Right.
to see the personal relationship between Dooley and his man.
Yeah.
We are going to refer to Krasminski a lot through the rest of the season. He's not the only agent that dies. You guys, it bothers me right at the end where we talk about Krasminski in this, heavy way that we're dealing with his death, moments after another SSR agent has been shot and killed in the stairwell of the building across the street when they're hunting Dottie Underwood. We don't know that guy. He's fine. I mean, then there's Yauk, who is manipulated by Dr. Rivyanko and
But
is
no one
sent out in front of a
knows
truck.
that.
Nobody knows
Yeah.
that was murder, but still he just died.
Sure, yeah.
But Krasminski was special, you guys.
True.
Well, I mean,
Everybody
Krasminski
loves
is
Ray.
the only one that, Susan knew his middle name. It was Walter.
Yeah, but his first name was Agent. I really like that speech. That is a very, very good speech. When
And very reminiscent of what Peggy says to Ray Wise whenever she goes and he's all like, well, hey there, sweetheart. What's your name? Agent.
yes,
Yeah.
it's very good. It's very good. On to episode 4, the Blitzkrieg button, where we begin with the recovery of one Howard Stark, our little River Tam moment when he's inside his storage container. Not quite a river.
I
moment,
was going to
suppose.
say.
He
his
has
looks
all
way
the comforts.
swankier.
But this is definitely the Howard
Also,
Stark
how do you
version
play
of that.
pool?
By yourself?
No, in a train car. Like as the train car is moving. Like pool
I
seems
don't
like
think
a
he
hard
would have
one.
played. Well, okay.
Probably he
No,
just waited.
Star Trek.
To Stark Tech,
Star
yes.
Trek.
He has
Star Tech.
tiny
Star Tech
repulsors
is the answer. I
under the
love it.
bottom
Okay.
of the pool table
Yeah,
that keeps it
I'm there.
perfectly
Yep.
level, no matter what. He also has
It's a
those under his bed for no
gyroscopic
real
pool
reason.
table.
So we get the recovery of Howard Stark, and I was thrilled to see this because I had assumed that Dominic Cooper would be a cameo
Sure.
in the season. I didn't think that he would be a major, contributor
Sure,
to the arc of the
sure.
season. I think he's just great. I know I'm echoing what you two have said previously about his performance, but I love this version of Howard Stark because he brings all of that frailty that we get from Robert Downey Jr.'s performance too. There's a degree of self-loathing associated
Yes.
with Howard Stark that he will definitely pass on to his son, assuming he has a son someday.
At some
some point in the 60s, 70s. Hey, let's not talk about the Marvel timeline.
No, one day we are going to have to do like a Patreon exclusive, like the mystery of Howard Stark, where we like straight up like the yarn on the wall
Yeah.
and all this stuff. I mean, we're going to be Anderson and Sherlock trying to figure out how did Dominic Cooper turn into John Slattery.
This is my two Stark theory because in this series, how old would you say Howard Stark is? He has to be 30 at least, right?
At
He's
least,
been
yeah, I was even
a
gonna say, like,
millionaire
33,
industrialist for
something, 35?
years. He's certainly worked all through the war. So here he is, 30. We're going to see him in the 90s when he's played by John Slattery. I mean, John Slattery doesn't look that old, you guys. He
Yeah.
looks like he's maybe in his 60s at that point. Maybe he was doing research with Vita radiation. So the rest of this episode is dominated by Chief Dooley's visit to
Can you
Germany.
talk really quick about my favorite part in the train car?
Yes.
Super quick. I love whenever Howard picks up the cue ball and then chucks it, and Peggy just very casually dodges to the side when he knocks out that guy behind her. Just like, no big deal. She's cool as a cucumber. I fucking love Peggy Carter.
Just a Thursday morning.
Yeah.
It's just life with
pretty
Peggy
great.
Carter.
She's so good.
Also, good aim, Howard.
Yeah.
So the rest of this episode is dominated by Dooley going to Germany, where he interviews a former Nazi Colonel Ernst Mueller about the Battle of Finau, which it turns out was pretty bad. And also not a battle. There were a lot of dead soldiers, but apparently no battle was fought at Finau. Let's put a pin in that until later. Back at the SSR, Thompson is in charge. He's focused on the Stark investigation, leaving Sousa to go down to the dock and investigate a couple of homeless guys who are living down there. We get some great Daniel Sousa in this episode. He is
so
the
good.
sweetest,
I really do
softest
like him.
boy.
I love
He is
him
the
so much.
cinnamonist role.
The cinnamonist roll.
Just adorable. Then Howard sends Peggy back into the SSR to recover what he calls the Blitzkrieg button. This is a weapon that is going to knock out all of the electricity in New York, I guess. It's going
For
to
years?
be real bad for years,
For years,
because once
which
you
makes
knock
no
it out,
sense.
That's
it
like
can't
a
be
wicked,
restored.
powerful
Come
EMP.
back.
What
It
the
is.
heck?
That's extraordinary. And it's just in this tiny little pocket-sized device, which is extraordinary. I wonder if it's really something else. Hey, you guys, it turns out it's really Captain Rogers' blood.
Yep.
What?
I know! Pretty exciting. I love, though, Peggy investigating the device.
Oh, yeah. Girl, like, shoot. She don't take no orders. She does what she wants.
Yeah.
That was very reckless, you guys. Probably don't hit that button.
Do you not approve? Do you not think that she has
you know,
reason to doubt Howard
no,
at this
of
point?
course she does. But that it could literally do anything.
Yeah.
That's true. It could have turned her into, like, I don't know, some sort of squid monster or something.
Some kind of
Sure.
Ant-Man.
Or just
Some sort of Ant-Man. Ant-Woman.
Ant-Woman.
big risk is all I'm saying.
How do you guys feel about this plot device, giving Peggy Steve's blood? I mean, this is so powerful.
If
This is-
anybody deserves it, it's Peggy. Like,
course.
she's the only one who can be trusted with this.
It's-
And she does do the right thing with it.
and you find it emotionally moving to see her holding this little vial?
I'm sorry, have you met me?
I know. I'm asking more for the benefit of the audience, Sarah. than
I'm
for
sorry,
my
has the
own
audience
benefit
not
at this
listened to any of this show?
Elizabeth, let me ask you, do you like Peggy having Steve's blood and all that it represents? The
Yes.
potential and the danger, and of course, the personal connection back to Captain Rogers?
Of course I do. Yeah, and the speech that she gives in the penultimate episode, I suppose, I think is lovely when she says that she just wanted a second chance at keeping him safe. You see all of that as soon as she understands
God,
what it
my
is.
heart.
And you see it as she smashes open the wall of her apartment. A lot of internal brickwork in this apartment. She
Yeah.
definitely has a neighbor on that side.
Well, no, she turned up the music so that she wouldn't
No,
hear
I
it.
get it. It's not so much the noise. It's the fact that the internal
Foundation.
walls and buildings, are they still built with brick? Layers and layers of brick? Maybe they were in New York in the 40s. I don't know.
knows? Who knows?
It's entirely possible.
weren't
Maybe
there.
we hadn't invented drywall yet. But she
Stark's
managed-
working on that.
It's his least impressive, but probably most important contribution to the 20th century. Yes. So Carter hides the Blitzkrieg button, all while the head smuggler, Otto Mink, the guy with the little automatic pistol that we've been foreshadowing all through the episode, breaks into the Griffith and tries to kill her, except he is waylaid by Dottie Underwood. And this is our reveal of Dottie. I love the audacity of a show that takes a whole episode to set up a villain and then takes him out in a second.
It's so good. I
It's
mean,
really great.
I remember being utterly just like, what the hell? Who are you, Dottie Underwood? What happened here?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very, very good.
Fantastic. Did the Dottie reveal work for you the first time you were watching the show,
Loved
Elizabeth?
it so much. Yeah. And that it was so physical. That wall leap.
She is a
snap his
Spider-Man.
neck.
Yeah.
Good Lord. So cool.
Yeah.
So what do you make of Dottie functioning as a primary antagonist for Peggy? Is she more than just a villain, more than just a foil, more than just a threat here? Is she somehow a reflection of Peggy? Is she somehow symmetrical with Peggy's?
nega-Peggy?
Is she nega Peggy? Which is now my favorite phrase in the English language. I say in the English language. What I mean is in the studio. Is she the nega Peggy? Are we supposed to learn something about Peggy from Dottie? Are we supposed to learn something about Dottie from Peggy?
I don't know. I didn't look at it that way, I suppose. I mean, I think that the fact that Peggy decided what she was going to be and Dottie was created make them fundamentally opposed in so many levels that it's hard to really draw any comparisons.
Yeah.
Aside from their gender, I don't know if there's a similarity that can be drawn.
I think that fundamental opposition is thematically interesting in and of itself. I think you just put your finger right on it, that Peggy is created, that Peggy is always herself, even when it would be easier not to be.
Yeah.
She is always herself.
For sure.
And Dottie, well, we don't know anything about her, who she really is, if she knows anything about who she really
either.
is.
I mean, when she sits down at Peggy's vanity and says, "What, hello, I'm Peggy Carter," or something, I mean, which is creepy as hell.
She is crazy
She's
pants.
super crazy creepy.
Oh, yeah.
Handcuffing herself to the bed every night because that's how she was raised.
Hey, does Natasha Romanoff do that, do you think?
I think Bobby Morse could tell us.
Bobby
You just had a moment
probably
right there.
with the handcuffs.
You just had a second right there. I saw it happen live on the internet. That's what just happened. That's pretty cute. Okay, we wrap up this episode with Chief Dooley returning from Germany without much information except some extra foreshadowing about the Battle of Finau, and then we close out the episode with the magic typewriter receiving a message and a very ominous look from Chief Dooley. It's pretty great. I like it a lot.
Dooley is done with this shit. He
It's
is just
pretty
so
damn
finished.
noir. And then the series takes a turn because episode 5 is very different from all of the other episodes in the series. Episode 5 is The Iron Ceiling. And this is our day trip to Russia.
Day trip
this
to
is
Russia.
This is SSR field trip. Let's
Yes.
go recover science. Let's do that. It'll
Go
be
to
great.
Summertime in California and frost all the trees.
We sure do that thing, don't we? We really do. Isn't it weird how the Russian border looks a lot like a studio set? So strange.
I'm sorry. It's so snarky.
No.
I'm sorry.
I completely get it. There are times in the first season in particular where Agent Carter's reach exceeds its grasp and it can't quite realize the potential contained within the story. And this, I think, is where they stretch the furthest. All of the sets in New York, I think, are brilliant. And even the street scenes in New York are obviously on a backlot somewhere in LA because
But
New York
beautifully
doesn't
done
look
with
like
that kind of like that nod and the homage
Yeah.
to the time and the movies
Sure.
of the time. Yes.
And it works, I think, in part because it feels like the golden age of Hollywood.
Yes,
It doesn't feel like
absolutely.
New York in 46, but it does feel like movies in 46.
Yes.
And that
Yes,
works
that's
really quite
absolutely
well.
right. Yeah.
Russia does not work so well, but none of that matters because Dum Dum Dugan.
Because Dum Dum Dugan.
Dum
You're
Dum
Our Howling
Dugan.
Commandos. I hate that name. I came up with that name. Yes, you did.
You're talking about Percival Pinky Pinkerton and Jonathan Jr. Juniper?
Yeah.
Is that and Samuel Happy Sam Sawyer? Is that who you're talking about, Sarah?
Yeah.
It's interesting that we get a bunch of Howling Commandos that we didn't know before who all die in the course of this episode. The Howling Commandos survived the war, but they could not survive Peggy Carter.
That's rough, man.
It is. It is.
Unnecessary.
We also begin this episode with the flashback to what we're calling the Red Room, what we're calling,
Yes.
this is the assassin training
Not
camp
very
in Russia.
red, to be fair.
Which is grim as hell. I mean, it starts off pretty grim. It starts off pretty bad and you think, ooh,
But
TV
also-
show, this is pretty edgy.
Like fantastic in
No.
like a really terrible, grim way.
Yes.
Like I love this. All I want, I mean, like, and maybe I'm a terrible, miserable, horrible, broken human being, but like, all I want is a Red Room series or movie or something.
It's the beat right at the end of the flashback sequence. And this is something that we'll do for pretty much the rest of the series is begin our episode with a flashback to explain some of our characterization here, some of our motivation here. The flashback to the secret origin of Dottie Underwood in Russia is terrifying. It's pretty bad. And then we get to the fight sequence where the two little girls are
Yeah.
fighting and we get the nod from the instructor and there is the definite snapping of a neck.
Yes.
Elizabeth, you said at the time, this is not a very efficient way of training assassins.
This is what I feel like. I mean, there's already at least 6 years of work put into this girl. And now she's just dead now. I mean, you could have just said, maybe do, tomorrow a little better.
I
Eva.
think,
What do you call Russian girls? I don't know. Nadia.
Ava, Anya, Nadia, Natalia,
I knew I asked the right person.
Anastasia, Helga, Olga.
Like all the guys are Ivan.
Yeah.
So, like, you
Sure,
just say
Ivan and Peter. Pater, I suppose.
Piotr.
No, you're right. That isn't in it. Well, I mean, like, but if you're the Red
that's a lot
Room
of work
and
that
you're
went into that.
literally like kidnapping these girls from wherever, I mean,
This
you
is
may
what
not
I
care.
decided. That
Yeah,
like
what did you
reach
decide?
a certain point in your training, and it's like, like when they make cuts
Yeah.
on like the like you're trying out the football team, you made it this far,
And you don't make it to varsity.
and you're just like, no, you're not varsity. Like we
in
know,
the Red
we
Room,
know.
when you're not varsity, you're dead.
That's exactly right. Once you hit a certain age, like if you haven't made it this far, you're never making it, kid. That's what I decided.
Oh, dip.
We only have 9 bunks in the senior dormitory. and 9 pairs of handcuffs. So I'm sorry, 15 of you girls just aren't going to make it. It's all right. It's Russia. We've got
God, it's like
literally
the-
millions of you.
Hunger Games, but a billion times worse.
So after our Red Room flashback sequence, we move back to the SSR where a high-level cryptographer is trying to crack the code, which was received on the magical typewriter, but your high-level cryptographers are no match for Peggy Carter, who solves it in like a second.
Literally like 3
Because
seconds.
she's the greatest, which
Yeah.
is
The greatest.
sufficient to get her into the office with Dooley, but getting her on the mission, the field trip to Russia, requires a phone call to one Dum Dum Dugan. She is going to recruit the 107th
I have a
onto this mission.
question.
Yes?
Does Dum Dum Dugan have a cell phone in 1946? Or like,
Yeah.
what is our situation?
Howard Stark
okay.
gave him one.
Got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
It's fine.
Accepted.
I really like by the end of the season, the SSR are running around with walkie-talkies. It's kind of a point at the beginning of the season that they can't communicate with each other when they're in the field. And then the writers figure out, oh, this is a pain in the ass. We need them to be able to talk. Let's give them future tech walkie-talkies. I'm kind of into that. So we go to Russia. Oh, before we get to Russia, though, we have the great locker room scene. This episode was written by Jose Molina, who you might know from Firefly. He worked with Ben Edlund on Trash and, most importantly, wrote Ariel, which
Those are some of our
is a
favorite episodes.
pretty
Yeah.
great episode. He's a
Yeah.
very skilled writer, and this is the proof of that because this scene works beautifully just as a character piece. It's a great moment to have Peggy
what I
walk
remember
into
the
the
most.
locker room is so strong, but then to use this as a pivotal moment in the Daniel Sousa stares at the photograph subplot that's been rolling all season. You guys, I'm not kidding. It's perfect. And Sousa's embarrassment and then realization, and Peggy's embarrassment is great, and Jack Thompson is God, the worst human being, just the
Yeah.
But
worst
it's
human
so
being
like
that there is.
no, I love this. I mean, like I know that he's being a bully and a jackass right now, but God, I freaking love it. Like it really works for me.
So most of the episode is taken up with our time in Russia, which, you know, there isn't a lot of plot there. It's just the field trip. It's pretty great. Neil McDonough is great as Dum Dum Dugan. It is great to see that chemistry with Peggy. It is great to see another character who remembers Steve, another character
Yeah.
who served with Steve and was crucially inspired by Steve. It's just fantastic. The plot itself isn't so terribly important. They recover the physicist and his psychiatrist, Dr. Ivchenko. There's a giant firefight at the end of the episode, and we
Do as
recover.
Peggy says comes from this
Do as
episode.
Peggy says. Yes.
yeah.
What would Cap
The
say if I let his
interiority of-
best girl get in trouble? He would say, do as Peggy says. And
So
you
good.
know that he would.
Yeah.
I love
That is
Peggy
the
Carter,
only
you
tattoo
guys.
that my husband said I could not get.
Do as Peggy says?
Yeah.
Okay, we may need to sit him down after we're done recording
Well,
this
I'm
podcast
getting I
and
know
have a
my value, so I
conversation.
suppose that was a fair
works.
trade.
That works. So we take Dr. Ivchenko back to the States, back to the SSR. That is going to work out quite nicely, I think, for everyone. We also get Jack Thompson's story
Yes.
where he fell asleep on
Yeah.
duty while serving in the Pacific Theater. A number of Japanese soldiers passed his position. He woke up just in time to see them about to murder his platoon and shot them all in the back. Because that's how a Jack Thompson do, I guess. And then we get the beat at the end of the episode where it turns out they were also carrying a white flag, also surrendering
Which
when he shot
didn't
them.
see until
Right. But the original story isn't terribly heroic either because he
No.
still fell asleep at his post. Jack Thompson, not the world's greatest guy, but this is crucial because
and
we
the
do
real
get to see
beautiful
him
part is
suffer with it.
Why that's true, but I think the most beautiful part about this story was how he came to tell it, which is that Peggy was giving him a seat at the table with the Howling Commandos
Yeah.
because she is good friggin' people, y'all.
Yeah,
Yes.
she is. It's really great. And seeing her in that community is
Yes.
to see her move from the SSR where she is not respected or even really seen
Yes.
Yeah.
to move into her own theater of capability and to see
Right.
her stand alongside Dum Dum Dugan and the other
Well,
Howling
and I mean,
Commandos.
even when they
Damn.
first get there and the SSR agents are talking to Dugan and they're all like, "You actually served with Captain America, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, but not as long as she did."
Yeah.
Like it's so good. I
It's
love Dum Dum
really,
Dugan.
really good. He's
Yeah.
fantastic, and seeing Peggy back in this context is just wonderful.
Where she belongs.
And I think you can see that at the end of the episode where Dum Dum offers her basically a standing position with the Howling Commandos, and she's like, "Oh, but I could though. I could just be a superhero here. It would be great."
but Daniel,
But no, but Daniel. Well, maybe not so much
I don't know if
Daniel.
that's what she's thinking yet. but
Yeah,
I'm
maybe
sure
not
what she is
quite
thinking
that.
Yet. I would
what
take
is she
him up on
thinking?
that.
She's got to prove herself back
Miss
home.
Union Jack is a good name.
Miss Union Jack is a great name.
I think I'm with the other Howling Commandos. Actually, not sure that's a great name. Union Jack would be pretty good. Just Union Jack.
Just
I
Union
don't know
Jack?
that we necessarily have
What
to
about
gender
Miss
all of our superhero names.
America?
I feel like that would be inappropriate. I don't think Peggy
would
would
be
want
Probably,
to
yeah.
would want
No,
to wear
you're
that.
totally right.
I think, English is actually the best code
English
name
is pretty good.
English
Yeah.
for Peggy. And
Man,
Angie
I
was
love
the one who
Angie.
came up
Yeah.
with it.
No, Angie figured it out
Right.
pretty much immediately.
So back in the US, while all of this is happening, Dottie breaks into Peggy's, not breaks in, I suppose. She lets herself in. She stole her key back at the beginning of the episode.
That's still a break-in.
And goes through all of Peggy's belongings. It is a super creepy sequence. Dooley meets with a journalist friend of his who is fantastic, and I wish had popped up in the season again. I kind of believe that he would have been a recurring character into season 2 if we hadn't decamped to Los Angeles, because it was kind of easier to shoot LA and make it look like LA rather than shooting LA and making it look like New York.
Fair.
And the budget was not as high in season 2, which accounts for some of the problems with season 2. I think we'll get to all of that someday in the future when we discuss season 2 here on Excelsior. But we learn more about the Battle of Finau. Dooley learns that Stark had gotten into a fight, that Stark had gone to
Right.
Finau after the quote-unquote battle, had gotten into a fist fight with a General John McGinnis. But other than that, we know nothing. And this is the point where Dooley starts to come around on the idea that perhaps Howard Stark is not simply a traitor. Perhaps he is not simply public enemy number 1, but much more importantly, Sousa's coloring in a photograph, you guys. He's there with his little Crayola pack. He's just sketching.
The silliest thing, arguably, in the episode is him coloring in this picture, and also when Dottie takes down the instructions from Ivchenko.
Yes,
Ivchenko.
that is,
right?
yeah. Well, we'll get to that, in fact, in the next episode, episode 6, A Sin to Air, where Carter and Jarvis investigate all of the many women that Stark has been involved with over the last 6 months. This is a great sequence.
There are so many baby
But-
Starks all across this country that we just know nothing about. Tony Stark has so many half siblings.
think I might know what Howard Stark's first invention was.
A condom?
Yes.
Okay.
Like some kind of electronic, atomic
Nope,
powered.
nope.
It also tends to overheat and explode.
Stop. You have to stop.
So we're researching the female Leviathan operative, who we now know killed Krasinski too. Sousa reveals to Dooley that Carter is a traitor, and all agents are tasked with tracking her down. This is it. This is the turning point in the series.
Yes.
I love this episode. There isn't a lot of plot. There is a lot of running around and
Yeah.
a lot of desperation. And we get to see what really matters to Peggy when she is up against the wall. And it's Steve's blood, you guys.
Yeah.
It's Steve's blood. The scene where Peggy bursts out of the automat
Yes.
and Jack Thompson is just lounging in the alley because he knew that she would take out the other SSR agents. I love it. And
Thompson
then the
is good at his job.
The turn when Sousa shows up
Oh my gosh.
and she just says, "You won't shoot me, Daniel," and walks past him. I love everything about this.
Yeah.
Every
No,
single
it's
thing
so
about
good.
this. It takes us 6 episodes to get here because we have to know these characters. We have to know these relationships, but it works so beautifully, so powerfully. I adore this final turn. How do you guys feel about Peggy now being on the outs with the SSR, being a hunted fugitive herself?
I mean, it seems pretty much, I mean, like, that just kind of like seems like the thing that's going to happen, right? I mean, like, this is a pretty common thing that's going to happen in these stories where our hero is kind of on the outs and then suddenly, like, our hero is the bad guy and then our hero comes back and is like a proper hero. So, I mean, yeah, I love it. I love the scenes with Thompson. I love the scene. I love whenever Angie, like, starts weeping on Thompson's shoulder there at the Griffith. That whole thing is really great. And Peggy's, like, on the outside trying not to fall off this damn building. I'm curious if Susan and Peggy ever have a conversation about, hey, remember that time you almost shot me, but then totally didn't?
Remember that?
When, you know,
Remember
later
how did
in
you
their
get
marriage.
out of the Griffith? How did that work out?
How'd that work out? Did you just jump down?
Meanwhile, at the SSR, Ivchenko has revealed that he is actually working for Leviathan and hypnotizes poor Agent Yao, who just cannot get a break, it would
I
seem.
guess not. Yeah.
What I need you
Just
to do
walks
is
right
tell
into
me
traffic.
everything about the SSR, then go downtown, have a nice glass of bourbon, and walk out in front of a truck. Tough day to be Agent Yao, I
Seems
suppose.
like a nice kid, sweet little middle child.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
God, that's heartbreaking.
It is.
Yes.
I know.
Carter then returns to the Griffith. She retrieves Steve's blood from the hidey hole in her apartment. She gets ultimately, after the Angie interlude, gets knocked out by Dottie Underwood and the knockout lipstick, which
Hey!
is just fantastic.
It's a great scene.
You're a big fan of this scene, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm into it.
Any particular reason?
I'm queer as hell.
It makes a great gift, though.
It's great to see Dottie leveraging, I was going to say leveraging her own femininity to take out Peggy, but she's not. What she's doing is leveraging Peggy's femininity to
Yes.
take out Peggy because that's Peggy's lipstick. It's the Sweet Dreams. Is that the name of the?
Yeah, I think so.
Dreams. Uh-huh.
That's so cool. And also such
Pretty
a
darling.
chintzy, spy thriller thing.
Yeah.
The knockout. How does that knock you out when you put it on your own lips?
Makes
is the
no
question.
sense. Makes zero
If the
sense.
application of this lipstick to lips knocks someone out,
No, hang on. It's one of the, okay, so you know how, okay, you may not know this, Alistair, but Elizabeth, you know how like you get those
Yes,
lipsticks that
I
have
know where
like
you're going.
the layer
Yes.
on the outside, so you put the lipstick on and then you put like the sealant on the
Yes,
outside? It's
it's
the
like
sealant that knocks you out. The lipstick is protecting her from being knocked out.
So we close out this episode with Carter being taken into custody by the SSR. She's put in the interrogation room, and that's our cliffhanger ending for episode 6. We move into episode 7, Snafu. Did you guys know the word snafu?
Situation normal, all fucked up.
There it is.
Really?
Yeah.
I
It
didn't
is
know
a
that.
military acronym, apparently, from the Second World War, from the American forces in the
Wow.
Second World War. There it is. That's what that word means.
That's fun. I didn't
Yeah.
know.
See,
Okay.
the great thing about the Excelsior podcast is that you learn as you're listening to nonsense for an hour and a half as we discuss Agent Carter or any other Marvel-related topic.
Or DC or
Occasionally
Image.
Suicide Squad. It's fair.
Yeah.
As Carter is resisting interrogation at the SSR, Jarvis appears with a signed confession by Howard Stark. He's admitting to everything, you guys. He definitely did that. Howard definitely wrote this.
Super duper did
and
this.
signed it. Definitely did it. This is necessary for Carter's release. However, Carter sees Ivchenko communicating with Dottie Underwood across the street in Morse code and tells the truth about the confession, that it is in fact a forgery concocted by Edwin Jarvis. She then tries to get the trust back of the other SSR agents. Ivchenko by this point has hypnotized Dooley. He steals one of Stark's weapons. We don't know what that does until we get to the crowded cinema where it is released, and I mean, Battle Royale, I
Like
suppose.
Uber massacre, like
Yeah.
everyone dies
It's pretty bad.
in
We-
like the worst
The
way.
worst ways.
Yeah.
Yes.
We also learned that in 1946, you could leave your baby's pram in the middle of a crowded theater and then walk out, and no
walk
one
out.
would say anything about it.
Oh shit!
Well,
I think in
that one
1946
lady
people
gave
were
that
yeah, no, I think that people were like leaving their babies on the sidewalks all the time while they were like wandering into speakeasies. I mean, it was a different time.
We're glossing over a lot of episode 7 because it really is just build up for our series finale with episode 8. We get the sequence in the theater, which is just horrifying. And then by the time we get back to the SSR, we find Dooley wearing the jacket, the
blow-up
suit,
vest?
whatever that is, the experimental vest, which was given to him by Ivchenko. This is the thing that is going to explode, which Jarvis explains. Jarvis is so great through the sequence. I just adore it.
I really enjoy this entire sequence. I think that everybody does just an amazing
Yeah.
job. And I mean, I always I begrudgingly liked Dooley a lot up until this point, and then I was like, no, I legitimately really, really like Chief Dooley.
Dooley wins me over when he sends Carter to Russia.
Yeah.
That's the moment when he
yeah,
recognizes
yeah.
her
I don't
absolute
have time for
capability.
your little crush on Carter.
Yeah. Oh god, it's
Such
so
a
good.
great line.
It's real good.
But it's one of those moments, and it took me a few times through this entire series to kind of see this clearly. They were setting up Jack as a rival love interest for Peggy, right?
What?
It was going
think
to
so.
be a love triangle
Really?
between
I think
Peggy
so.
and Jack and Susan.
Peggy would never take Jack.
She absolutely would. She absolutely
no.
would. She likes Howard. She likes him.
But she doesn't like Howard.
no. She doesn't
What are we
like.
doing?
She doesn't fondue Howard.
She
but
didn't fondue Jack either.
we could get him there if he were really a good man. If he could overcome his, sense of inadequacy. If he could overcome his sense of guilt and of shame, he could be a good man.
No. She saw Sousa and realized that Sousa is capital G good, whereas
Well,
Jack is just. I
but
mean,
the
Jack
other
is doing
thing-
his
You don't
best.
think that Peggy would do a one-night stand with Jack Thompson?
Well,
That's what I saw happening.
That could also happen.
She regrets it, especially because she knows that there is that inner kernel of goodness. She knows that it's there, but also that he's decided to be an asshole, kind of
no,
hates herself
you're
for
right.
it.
you know
That's
what?
the
Write
story.
me that fanfic, and we'll see if you convince me.
They're working together on something. He's actually a good dude for like 15 seconds,
Right.
and that's all it takes. That's all she
That's
needs.
because no, but like still okay, all right, no, okay, yes, no. Write me the story, and we'll see if it convinces me.
I really like the chemistry between those two.
No, they have excellent chemistry.
We have to remember too that the problem with Peggy and Daniel is not Peggy, it's Daniel.
Yep.
He doesn't believe that he's worthy of her.
He has no confidence.
Because this
Nobody
is
would
Captain
trade in
America's
a red,
best
white,
gal.
blue shield for
There you
an
go.
aluminum crutch.
That's it, which is a great line and
is a
very,
very good line.
and we see Sousa, they're really struggling with the consequence of the war. It's, wow, it's tough.
I'm sorry, I have such an affection for Daniel Sousa that I just can't.
Daniel
can't.
Sousa,
If-
also capital G good. No, and obviously
Sure,
they're setting
yeah.
up this love triangle. We know how it's going to go down.
Yeah,
we know how
no,
it would
no.
work out in
You
the
know
end.
what though? That would have
She's
been
never Mrs. Jack Thompson. We all
well,
know that.
no, hell no. Good God. Angie maybe. But anyway, that would have been a lot more interesting than Dr. Wilkes in season 2.
Oh, we're not talking
We're
about
not
season
talking
2.
about it, I know.
And we're
More
sure as
interesting
hell
than
not
Wilkes.
talking about Jason Wilkes because
Can we just skip him entirely
goodness.
when we do that?
Dooley ultimately makes the greatest sacrifice. He runs
jeez.
across the SSR office. This is a great shot as
It's
he
so
runs across
good.
the office, firing at the window, and then jumps through it,
So good.
only to explode while his agents are across the street and Sousa is about to get into a fist fight with Dottie Underwood. It's so great.
Pretty
It's
great.
so action-packed. It's so... I am completely engaged by this episode, even though ultimately it's just a build-up for the season finale.
Yes.
The audience in the theater, though, is just terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just absolutely terrifying. And
It's
we get
really the darkest part of the whole show. I
Oh,
think.
absolutely.
Oh,
and I think one of the
yeah, I
darkest
think-
things we've seen in the entirety of the MCU.
and I don't think it's clear at that point that we're calling back to Finau. I didn't
No.
make the connection with Finau at this point. It wasn't until the last episode
Yeah, I
of the
don't
series
think that
actually
we're supposed to. I think they
ties them
have to
together.
kind of spoon feed it
But
to you.
it works well enough that I think that if you were paying very close attention and viewing Agent Carter as a mystery instead of a spy thriller, that
then
you
you
could
could have
actually
put
put
it
the pieces together.
together.
Yeah,
Sure.
this,
You're probably
this Russian detachment that just fell upon itself, that
Yeah,
murdered
yeah,
itself.
yeah.
And then Howard Stark shows up. It makes
sense.
It makes
No,
consistent
it's good.
sense. In our last episode, then, Valediction, the SSR discovers the gas cylinder in the cinema, and they realize that Ivchenko possibly plans to turn all of New York on itself. We get that great beat with Sousa investigating and finding the canister and the little puff of gas that is enough to make him attack Jack Thompson, try and strangle Jack Thompson, and then hit Peggy,
Yep.
which is... Yeah, that's pretty serious. We also learn that Howard Stark did in fact create this gas, nicknamed Midnight Oil, to give American soldiers extra stamina during the war. But hey,
This
it
is
doesn't
what
so much
Ludendorff used
keep
in
you
Wonder
up.
Woman.
It is basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except, well, I guess still homicidal rage. Yeah.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. That's probably Howard Stark too. It was a complete disaster, and Stark regrets it. He flew to Finau to see the consequence of the misapplication of his technology. This is what happens when Howard Stark's creations are taken by the military instead of being kept in perfectly safe private hands. Stark believes that Dr. Ivchenko is blaming him for the massacre and volunteers to be used as bait. So we get this great press conference where Jack Thompson is apologizing on behalf of the world to Howard Stark, a real American hero. I am dazzled by his. Anyway, here's Howard Stark. It's great, but Ivchenko and Dottie Underwood's improvised plan works beautifully. They fire shots at the building, which forces Stark into retreat. They then take him. Here is the plot hole that spoils the end of the season for me just a little bit. When Stark is hustled by Jarvis into the alley and he gets into the police car that is driven by the police officer who has been hypnotized by Ivchenko, yes? Ivchenko didn't know that they were doing this plot when he met that police officer. That police officer pulls Ivchenko and Dottie over prior to the news that Howard Stark is coming back into the city because they're already at the airport when Ivchenko hears on the radio that Howard Stark is going to be
Well, no, we
pardoned.
already solved this, right? Because we already talked about how Ivchenko is actually an Inhuman.
Okay. Also, he can
say-
see the future. Makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Well, or if he just decided, this cop is on to me. I mean, they had to just knock him out and put him in the trunk, right? That's why they had him?
I mean, possibly. Why
Or he
wouldn't
just,
Dottie
like-
have just killed him? We're certainly led to believe that Dottie would
Dottie
have
might
just
have
killed
just
him.
killed him.
Listen, I feel like Dottie would have just killed whoever the hell she wanted to. Dottie is
Yeah.
crazy pants. I don't know.
That's so great when they get to the airport and he's sitting in the car listening to the radio and we get the false news story about Howard
Yeah.
Stark being, exonerated of all charges. And we just see in the background of the shot her beating the crap out of the guy.
Yep.
I am a sucker for those kinds of shots. I love that every single time I see it. It is like one of my favorite things.
Anytime we de-emphasize brilliant fight choreography, yes, no, I'm
like
with
for
you on
somebody
that.
just sitting there like drinking coffee or whatever. Yeah, no, I'm wicked into that.
So Fanhoff, Ivchenko, now has Stark. He takes him to Stark's secret aerodrome, I guess, because it turns out not everything was seized by the SSR. And he
Well, how do you
convinces-
seize an aerodrome? What are you gonna do?
I
mean,
think
like,
you take the planes.
Oh.
At least, or the cars.
Well-
It's a weird hangar that he has where he apparently just takes girls on dates. At the hangar, Ivchenko hypnotizes Stark and convinces him that the only way to save Captain America
God.
is to actually drop the gas on Times Square during VE Day. This is going to be apocalyptic for the good people of New York, but tying it back to Stark's guilt over the loss of Captain America is... God, it's just beautiful. The
Yeah.
way that we amp up all of our emotional entanglements right here at the end of the season, because we've got Stark going after Cap, which is such an iconic thing. We've got Peggy wanting, that to be true, but knowing absolutely that it isn't true and feeling her duty to Stark. And then we've got Jarvis right in the middle going up in another plane ready to shoot Howard Stark down. It's incredibly emotionally fraught and operatic.
Momentous.
I feel
It's
fraught
operatic.
right now.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
beautiful.
so good. Peggy, of course, this time manages to save the person that she's talking to over the radio.
Shut up!
Howard isn't named Steve and thus manages to land the plane in the correct fashion.
Listen, if you're a lady, if you're anyone and you are in love with a man named Steve, don't let him get on a plane.
Don't let him fly a plane.
Don't let him fly a
He
plane.
can go on a plane.
Yeah, if he jumps out of the back
Anytime.
of a plane, he's probably fine. Do not let your Steves fly plane. Mamas, don't let your Steves grow up to be pilots.
Stark lands back at the aerodrome where, I should say, while all of this has been happening, Sousa and Thompson get Ivchenko. We get this great sequence with Sousa falling under the hypnotic influence of Dr. Ivchenko, except not really, you guys, because earplugs.
Right. He does a real good job faking it. So he must be lip reading a little bit and also just using context clues. Smart guy is what I'm saying.
Sousa's very
guy,
smart.
Sousa.
I
Yeah.
like it quite a lot. It is
It's fun,
pretty
yeah.
adorable. We also get
I
this
also like to
fantastic
see
fight
Jack
sequence.
Thompson shaking in his boots a little bit, thinking that
Yeah.
he might actually get shot in the face by Daniel Sousa, which we all kind of want.
He
Maybe not
deserves
in
a
the
little
face.
bit.
The knee, maybe?
Sure, yeah, I shot him in the foot.
Don't shoot your brother in the foot.
Don't shoot your brother.
Okay. We also get during the sequence the fantastic fight scene between Peggy and Dottie. It's
It's so good.
so good.
It's so good.
And Peggy takes her hits during the sequence.
She sure
too.
does.
Yeah.
I love
Literally with
that
a
we're
baseball bat.
Yeah, we're not afraid of that physicality, which we oftentimes are. Again,
Particularly with women.
not to be
Sure.
critical of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but we oftentimes kind of retreat a little from
Sure.
that with our female characters in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and certainly in the MCU too. But the raw physicality, it's the moments when Dottie throws her against the wall, and there's just that crunch of impact, and it's
Yeah.
not elegant, and it's
Yeah.
not sexy, and it's not cool, it's just brutal. And that is absolutely to this show's credit, I think. Of course, Dottie is thrown out of the window and dies on the wing of a plane, and we'll never see her again. Definitely safe to turn your back on Dottie Underwood just because she
Sure.
appears to be dead, you guys. And that is basically it. We have Ivchenko in custody. He gets shipped off to a prison where he makes friends with Arnim Zola.
Heyo.
I have to tell you,
I like this.
I'd completely forgotten about this beat at the end of the
Yeah.
first
Super
season.
exciting for you again?
It was
was.
super exciting.
gasped.
As
It was
soon
very
as I saw it, I
exciting.
thought, oh my God, that's Toby Jones. That's Arnim Zola.
Mm-hmm.
And that's beautiful. I love the commitment to
Oh my
connecting
God.
Agent Carter.
Ivchenko taught them how to screw with Bucky's brain and hypnotize him. It literally does all
It
come
could
back
be.
to, yeah.
It really could all come
Ivchenko
back
is
to him.
literally like a hypnotist and human, and he taught everybody else how to do the stuff with the Winter Soldiers.
How do you guys feel about the resolution that we get here at the end? Is the mystery satisfactorily resolved?
I don't
for
care
you?
about any of that. All I care about is Peggy on the bridge.
So you're not engaged by the actual unfolding of the Leviathan
It's
mystery through
great,
the course
it's
of
wonderful, it's lovely, whatever.
But it's
It
just beat,
pales in
action
comparison.
beat, action beat,
Yes.
action beat to get you through the season.
Which is weird because generally I love all the action sequences
Sure.
and really enjoy them. But I mean, this is all great, and then they give me the much
No,
better
I
part.
get that. I'm walling that off for now because we're
Okay.
going to talk about that in just a second. Elizabeth,
Okay.
does the mystery work for you? Are you engaged by the spy thriller aspect of Agent Carter? Because it is kind of a hybrid between this kind of MCU superheroic story and a much more conventional post-war noir, mystery thriller. Does that side of things work for you? Are you engaged by the story of this mysterious Russian battle and all of Howard Stark's missing technology and who can we trust and who can't we trust and who's working for whom?
Sure, as the framework for the characters and the costumes and the
Right.
jokes and the quips and the yes. So I'm kind of Team Sarah on this one. Yeah. It's
So if we
I'm
remove
glad
this-
that it all worked because if it didn't work, I'd be pissed. If it's
Yeah.
like,
Oh, sure.
If there were just a bazillion plot holes, that would bother me. So
Right.
I'm happy that they did their work, they did their research, and everything lines up. But I also don't care that much.
It is fair to say, I think, that much like the Winter Soldier, there is a really solid architecture to this mystery, but it's right under the surface.
Yeah.
And if you're just watching Agent Carter, particularly if you're watching it because it's an MCU property, because you really love Haley Atwell, because you're into the, kick-assness of it all, that you might not track the movement of the plot. And it can feel sometimes like people are just saying, Leet Brannis in urgent tones, and you're not sure why. You killed Krasinski. Which one was Krasinski? Who killed him? I'm not sure but I think on careful analysis, the framework really holds up, which is absolutely true of The Winter Soldier 2, as we discussed in the episode that we did about that movie. I really like the way that this is framed. I really like the amount of foreshadowing that we get. We get the whisper, Leviathan, in the first episode, and that's kind of cheap. Enigmatic proper noun is kind of cheap foreshadowing.
Basically the pronoun game.
Exactly right. But as soon as we get into episode 2, we start getting really good and positive structural foreshadowing of the rest of the season. I'm very satisfied. I think I have a little more interest in this kind of post-war noir mystery plot than either of you two do.
Yes.
But it works on that level too, which is just great. I'm very satisfied by the mystery, very satisfied by the resolution. But then we get the real point of the series, which is Peggy on the bridge with the vial of Steve's blood, which is given to her by Edwin Jarvis, who has allowed Howard Stark to believe that it was lost. That it was just
fantastic.
I don't know, sir. I couldn't possibly comment. Instead, he gives it to Peggy because he knows that.
Jarvis, also capital G good.
Yes, yes. And I think we only realize that right at the end. I owe
Yeah.
Howard Stark a great deal, but he does not own my integrity.
Yes.
That is such an important moment. And we get to see even Jarvis is inspired by Captain America. And this has
Yes.
always been the greatest power that Cap has is the ability to lead. It is the ability to inspire. He is the icon. He is the symbol, capital G good. He can inspire in a way that, I mean, none of our other heroes can. None of the other
Absolutely none of
MCU
them.
heroes
No.
can do what Cap does when he's at his best. I love that we see that ripple out through this attendant story. And even those moments where we get Jack Thompson talking about Cap, or we get Chief Dooley talking about Cap, and certainly Daniel Souza talking about Cap, we get the myth. And I love that. But it all comes back to a woman on a bridge with a vial of blood. What did you make of this scene? I mean, I know that you were emotionally ruined and wrecked by it forever, possibly.
Uh-huh.
Did it work for you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I remember weeping profusely and just being like, she had to say goodbye to him twice, and it wasn't really a proper goodbye either time. And it's painful and awful and terrible and beautiful and wonderful and perfect all at once. Yeah.
Yeah. Elizabeth?
I thought it was lovely too. There's something about that green screen basically that is
Yeah. The special effects in the sequence, the compositing in the sequence,
Yes.
not as good as you would like them
not
to
as
be.
good as I would like.
They
but at
spend
the
a lot
same
of money
time,
on Howard Stark flying toward New York in his plane, which also doesn't look great, you guys. I wish that they'd kind of saved a little bit of the budget, just a little bit, for this sequence, because, I'm a little distracted by the effects too. But if you can look past that to the emotional core of the beat, it
I do like the beat
ruins
very
you. Do you
much.
find it inspiring? Do you find it...
To me, it's sweet and it's some closure, but the biggest emotional response I got was her on the radio with Stark and Jarvis, and the haunting memory of
that
Steve.
screws
over
me
it.
up so bad. Yeah.
that was the really emotionally resonant part of this episode for me. But this is a lovely way to just kind of say goodbye and cap the season. And it also felt like if Agent Carter never came back, then it was just a solid closure.
Oh,
Which I
absolutely.
liked.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Is there a sense in which Peggy pouring the blood into the river and then dropping the vial, is there a sense in which this is representative of the passing of a golden age? Do you feel that we're moving into a darker time? There were a couple of beats in this episode, in this season, which are foreshadowing the Cold War and kind of looking back with a kind of nostalgia, a kind of grim nostalgia on the simple, clean, good versus evil conflict of the Second World War. I want to distinguish here the Second World War in real history from the Second World War in the context of the MCU.
Right, yeah.
One of those is clean and simple. One of those is not, you guys.
Yes.
But is there a sense in which we are now moving into the modern world? Were you struck by the sense that Peggy Carter now has to exist in a darker world, a more complicated world, a world in which it isn't always clear who the good guys are and who the bad guys are?
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. And it would be really... It's really interesting because we see Peggy Carter throughout like these various phases in time, like throughout the different movies, and also in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. we get to see her again, but that's like still kind of in the 40s, so it's basically the same Peggy that we're used to, but we get to see her as like she's aging up. And so this idea that Peggy kind of had to face like the Cold War like alone, not really, because obviously she's got, you know, the SSR, and presumably at that point she's got S.H.I.E.L.D. behind her, but like without Cap, without the soldier, without Captain America, like it would be... Yeah, I don't know. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that you're making a really good point that like we are now transferring into this like darker age where we don't have heroes. We don't have Iron Man yet, and Iron Man is like the first like real hero that we get of the modern
Iron
age.
Man is a complicated hero.
Absolutely,
Anyway,
yeah. But I mean, we don't even have Captain Marvel yet,
Yeah.
and who knows what that timeline's going to do to the rest of the movies. We'll deal with it when we get there.
Sarah is referring to the teaser trailer that was shown at SDCC this
Yes.
last week for Captain Marvel, in which it was revealed that Captain Marvel takes place in the 1990s.
Which is confusing and just screws up the timeline even more. But
You
whatever,
guys,
we'll talk about that later.
The Marvel timeline is already on the floor bleeding. We don't need to keep kicking it.
We are just beating the hell out of that thing.
We need
I
to
don't
just
know.
let's take care of it.
We
Let's
need
get
to
it a
just-
cold compress and a cup of tea, shall
Yes.
we?
Some schnapps and a rhubarb pie.
That may be the most British thing I've ever said.
But no, I do think that makes a lot of sense. And I think I also completely agree with Elizabeth that if we had not had a second season, that this would be just a perfect closer to this season and,
think so
the
too.
end of Peggy's story from her POV and not just as an accessory to these other stories that are going on that we see later in some of the films.
And as far as Marcus and McFeely knew, it was a one-season deal. So they wanted to tell a complete story, and they did
they
so,
did.
I think, admirably.
Yes.
Well, I think that there's really something there about the diluting of Captain America's blood by this dirty river water, that so much of
Aw.
just the pureness of what Cap, not even what Cap was, what Steve was.
Yeah.
Like his kind of virtue, there's no place for that
Yeah.
in the real world. So like in some ways he could only, I mean, and we see it didn't take long for, Civil War and for Steve to become forcibly compromised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a grim thought on which to end this podcast.
I'm sorry. Also, that hat though, the red hat and the blue dress.
Also, Cap comes back, you guys.
It's totally fine.
He's going to be a force for
okay.
good in the world again.
Yeah, he's
Cap's not
great.
even dead, Peggy. I don't know what you're worried about.
But
Just go
then
to the Arctic
she
and
gets
find him.
Alzheimer's and forgets him and then dies. And
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Lord.
Steve, you're alive? Not the time.
Okay,
That's
so
Agent Carter.
that's the end of our thoughts on Agent Carter.
Season
Season 1. I guess we will come back at some point to talk about Season 2. We have talked some shade, I think, or implied some shade about Season 2 of Agent Carter. Season 2 of Agent Carter was not a disaster. You guys, there's a lot of good
No,
about it.
there are-
It's
yeah.
just not as good as the first season, and
Absolutely.
it really peters out, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
As Season
Yeah.
1 builds to a thundering climax, Season 2 kind of doesn't so much. There are like a whole 2 episodes at the end of Season 2 which are pretty much unnecessary, but we will
Basically, yeah.
definitely talk about that at some point.
But Peggy and Daniel Susan make out, and I'm always here for that. So whatevs.
That will get us through a whole
Yep.
podcast's worth of discussion.
Naturally.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that will do it for
so.
this discussion. We will be back in the very near future. Vinton is coming back from vacation, and we are going to
Yay!
do a mega trailer breakdown from SDCC.
Yeah.
At SDCC, they released, 173 trailers for things, and we're going to
Something
watch
like that.
all of them.
Yep. The
At
Comic
least the
Con
comic
trailer
book related
palooza.
ones. We're going to talk about the new trailer for Infinity War, assuming that they have released that by then. We're going to talk about the teaser trailer for Captain Marvel, assuming that they've released that by then. We're certainly going to talk about the new trailer for Justice League. We're going to
Yes.
talk about the new trailer for Black Panther.
Yes.
Is there anything else that was definitely
Thor.
absolutely?
A new Thor trailer.
Ragnarok came out with a second trailer, which has me even more excited than
I
the
know.
first trailer,
I'm
you
so
guys.
freaking stoked. Yes.
Against all expectations, I think it's going to be pretty good. And we might rope Elizabeth in for that episode too, if you have a spare hour to watch trailers with us and talk about comic book movies and your reactions to some trailers that you genuinely don't care about that much.
Everyone wants that.
Everyone wants that. You're going to be our control just to make sure that we're not complete Marvel zombies.
She's like, guys, it's fine. Like, I don't understand.
There are also trailers for the new seasons on the CW of Supergirl and Arrow and
Yes,
Flash
yes.
and Legends of Tomorrow, which, hey, is
Well, and
this show that
Stranger
is still
Things
running.
too, which is
Can you
literally the
imagine
only
that?
TV show I care
yeah.
about.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think we're almost certainly going to do a show about the first season of Stranger Things.
Yes.
Much closer to the release of season 2. Because
Probably so, yeah.
I
It'll be our
can't
spoopy
take that right
episode
now. It'll
for
be a
October.
Spoopy October episode. So that will be
Yes.
coming out in your feeds very soon. We're not sure entirely when, but stay
Presumably
tuned
Monday.
for
Yeah, but we'll
a
figure it
schedule.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be around in the near future.
Well, that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you want to engage in the conversation, you can talk with us over on Twitter. We are at Excelsior Cast collectively. You can talk with me at Elsa Grab the Salt.
I'm at Paper Bullets.
I'm at Lizbeth Ray 555.
If you liked this show, if you enjoyed what we did over here, if you want to hear more of this thing, if you want to force Elizabeth to watch all the SDCC trailers, then head on
don't
over.
do that.
No, please do. Head on over to patreon.com/Common Room Radio. You can kick us $1 a month or whatever you can afford. You get also, you get all kinds of neat things for becoming our patron. You get like postcards. You get access to all of the Excelsior gag reels, which are kind of my favorite thing. And you definitely want to listen to the one from this episode because It's really, really good. That's all I'm going to say. A lot of feelings were had. And yeah, I think that's pretty much going to do it. So once again, from Common Radio, I'm Sarah K. Bazant.
I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Alistair Stevens. You should have seen her eyes when I escorted her from Mr. Stark's villa. The darkest gates to the abyss. Excelsior!